Welcome back, fellow retro voyagers. It's Paul Driscoll here, aka The Drisk, and join me as I look through Amiga games still worth playing today, this time for the letter B. This attempts to cut the fat and only give you those lean slabs of gaming goodness or interesting licenses and interesting oddities on the Amiga for the letter B. So sit back and enjoy as I take you through these interesting games. Okay, the first one is B-17 Flying Fortress. Now, Microprose brought its simulation expertise to the skies with this game, and it's a deep and remarkably authentic World War II bombing experience. Instead of controlling just one pilot, you command an entire 10-man crew, pilot, navigator, bombardier, gunners and engineers, all essential for survival. Missions involve long flights over enemy territory, requiring constant vigilance as you manage fuel, altitude, damage, formation flying, and relentless Luftwaffe attacks. The Amiga version impressively condenses the PC original while retaining its strategic depth and immersive tension. Each crew member can be individually controlled, and losing one has an immediate gameplay consequences and also affects you personally. The bomb run sequences complete with drifting crosshairs and flak explosions, which are memorable and intense. The learning curve is formidable with this game, but stick with it. Dedicated players will find a rich simulation that rewards planning, precision and teamwork. B-17 Flying Fortress remains one of the Amiga's most ambitious flight combat simulations and a standout in Microprose's stellar catalogue. Now, of course, today you could probably pick it up on GOG or what have you and play it on the PC, but I have fond memories of this on the Amiga. Then we come to another real favourite of mine. It is B.A.T, or B.A.T to its friends, coming out in 1990 by Ubisoft. This is one of the Amiga's most stylish and unusual hybrid adventures, blending point-and-click interactions, light RPG elements, and a vividly atmospheric sci-fi noir setting. I just love that sort of French sci-fi noir artwork in this game. You play the agent of the Bureau of Astral Troubleshooters, hence B.A.T, tasked with tracking down a rogue operative across a seedy underbelly of the planet Selenia. The game's strength lies in its gritty cyberpunk world building, neon lit bars, shady dealers, malfunctioning tech, and a cast of eccentric characters. A standout feature is the ability to customize your own cybernetic wrist computer, allowing for scripting and system manipulation, uncommon in Amiga titles of the era. Puzzles here, mixed dialogue, exploration and resource management, creating a layered experience that rewards experimentation. The interface can feel clunky today, but the ambition shines through, and I think B.A.T is a bold, atmospheric and mechanically unique, awesome sci-fi classic. It's for players who love their sci-fi stylish and narrative-driven. Now, talking of that, let's go to the sequel, B.A.T 2, the Koshan Conspiracy, released in 1992, also by Ubisoft. This expands the original gritty sci-fi noir formula into a full-blown open-world adventure, delivering one of the Amiga's most ambitious hybrids. You once again play the agent of the Bureau of Astral Troubleshooters, but this time the scale is far larger. Sprawling city districts, bustling hub spaceports, and a dynamic economy that reacts to your actions. The game blends point-and-click exploration, dialogue-driven investigation, RPG progression, and light trading, creating a sandbox-like experience rare for its era. Its cyberpunk world is richly atmospheric. Neon markets, corrupt officials, dangerous alleys, and eccentric factions all add texture and world building to the game. The ability to customize and reprogram your BOB computer, the arm wrist turns, offering a deeper system, tinkering, and mechanical flexibility. Combat is clunky and navigation can be overwhelming, but the ambition shines through through, B.A.T. remains a bold, fascinating and wildly unique adventure. It really is a cult classic for players who love their sci-fi worlds dense and enjoy the experimentation and exploration of science fiction worlds. Another classic is BC Kid, released in 1992 by Hudson Soft. If you're craving a dose of prehistoric platforming charm, then BC Kid delivers it with caveman gusto. Known elsewhere as Bonk's Adventure, this Amiga outing brings our big-headed hero signature headbutting antics to home computers with surprising fidelity. From the moment BC Kid bounds onto the screen, the game bursts with colourful cartoon, bright personality and awesome music. Controls are tight and responsive, making every noggin slam feel satisfyingly weighty, while levels brim with quirky foes and hidden treats. The Amiga conversion absolutely shines in the audio department. The music is catchy, cheerful, and wonderfully full-bodied, giving the game a lively pulse that pushes you forward. Sound effects, especially that trademark skull bash thud, are also spot on. It really is a fantastic update really to the TurboGrafx and PC Engine original. It has a gentle difficulty curve, console style polish and a brilliantly upbeat soundscape. BC Kid remains one of the system's most charming and confidentially crafted platformers. A proper Stone Age gem. Okay, then we come to Baal, released by Psygnosis in 1989. Now, Psygnosis brought us many dark, atmospheric action titles in the late 80s, but Baal fits that mould perfectly. This is a grim run-and-gun platformer, pitting you against demonic hordes of Baal himself, tasking players with recovering scattered weapons components across a labyrinth alien caverns. It's a classic Psygnosis fare, moody sci-fi visuals, organic metallic backdrops, and a sense of oppressive menace throughout. Controls are tight enough, though mastering jumps while dealing with respawning enemies does take practice and it is quite clunky. But combat feels satisfyingly crunchy once you power up your blaster, and the Amiga version boasts slick sprite work and detailed animation. Still look pretty good today, but particularly when you consider its age. The atmospheric soundtrack and eerie effects deepen the game's brooding tone. Baal isn't the most forgiving platformer on the Amiga, but stick with it and you'll find a tough, stylish, and unmistakably Psygnosis shooter that rewards persistence. A dark descent worth taking. Okay, then we come to Baby Bug. This brings the classic Ladybug arcade formula crawling onto the Amiga in one of the machine's interesting maze chase efforts. It is an unofficial port, but it's surprisingly faithful. You guide your little beetle around coloured mazes, munching flowers, avoiding relentless enemies, and making clever use of the trademark rotating gates that define the original coin-up strategy. Timing those gate flips remains wonderfully satisfying. Visually, Baby Bug is pure mid-80s. Visually, Baby Bug is really from the mid-80s charm. It has that blocky sprites, bright pastel layouts, and simple but readable animation. The sound is basic and cheerful, giving that game the unmistakable early micro buzz, and gameplay is fast, responsive, and captures that tactical rhythm that made the Ladybug arcade game such a standout among Pac-Man clones. Sure, this is primitive compared to other maze-like titles on the Amiga, but it's an interesting maze chaser, delivering colourful, addictive action and a solid dose of arcade nostalgia. A humble but heartfelt tribute to a forgotten classic. Okay, then we get Baby Joe in Going Home, released in 1991 by Loracell. This is a unique and charming platformer that stands out for its unlikely protagonist, a crawling toddler lost in a dangerous world. Unlike traditional heroes, Baby Joe must navigate the hazardous levels with fragile movement, limited mobility, and vulnerability to fall into pits, get attacked by enemies, and environmental traps. The game animation is fun, with Joe crawling, crying and expressive reactions, giving him a real personality. Level spans parks, caves, forests and suburban landscapes, each filled with obstacles that balance challenge with whimsical humour. Collecting bottles keeps Joe's energy up, adding a little bit of platforming fun. While the controls admittedly do feel slippery at first, they do get better as you get used to it, and it's just the colourful visuals and upbeat soundtrack and comical tone that just makes it, for me, a delight to play, no matter how clunky it is. Baby Joe is unconventional, fun, surprisingly tough in places, but it offers platforming awesomeness with a little twist that sets it apart from the more standard Amiga fare. Okay, then we go on to Back to the Future Part 2, released in 1990 by Imageworks. This is, of course, based on the classic film and offers a multi-genre adventure through several iconic moments in the film. The movie's time travel narrative, it delivers between the futuristic hoverboard action, which is the standout section, seeing Hill Valley in the future with all the cool nods to the film is the standout. It has just fun, catchy music. The other sections, they dip in quality, but, you know, I mean, I love the film, and this is an interesting adaptation that in many ways captures the experience and the fun of that film. So definitely one that I maybe not recommend, but definitely worth a play, just if you're a fan of Back to the Future. Okay, let's go on to Back to the Future Part 3, released in 1991, also by Imageworks. This, of course, like the film, goes back to the Old West, and it adapts the film in 3 arcade-style levels. There's the horse chasing, the shooting gallery, and the train finale. Each segment mirrors a major scene from the movie, giving fans a direct connection to the source material. The horse sequence is fast, visually impressive, well animated, and requires sharp reflexes as you dodge obstacles to rescue Clara. It also has an overhead sections where it's more like Gunsmoke, the arcade game. The shooting gallery level slows the pace, but is a very good adaptation of what's in the movie, and captures that dusty frontier atmosphere with colourful backgrounds and thematic music. The climactic train sequence ramps up the tension, with players navigating atop moving train carriages while avoiding hazards. Though short, the game delivers a polished and energetic experience, and is far better than the Mega Drive counterpart, where for some reason, due to a lazy port, they dimmed all the colours. So this is the more brighter, as it was supposed to be, gameplay. Yes, the game has straightforward design, but it does make it one of the more accessible film tie-ins of the era. It's a commitment to recreating the movie's memorable moments that gives it enduring appeal among Amiga film game collectors. Then we come to Bad Company. This is one of those early Amiga titles that wears its inspiration loudly on its sleeve. This is very much a Space Harrier style into-the-screen blaster, complete with scaling sprites, rushing terrain, and non-stop forward momentum. What you get is not exactly fast, but a rough-edge shooter that tries hard to deliver arcade thrills, even if it doesn't quite reach the Sega heights. The action is simple: dodge obstacles, blast the enemy waves, and deal with the chunky boss sprites that loom into view. The Amiga hardware does its best, but the scaling is choppy, and the sprite movement can feel uneven, giving the game a slightly jerky rhythm. Still, colourful graphics and the variety of enemy designs do inject plenty of personality, and it's why I wanted to give it a little shout out. I've got fond memories of this game. Sound effects are reasonable and crunchy. There is a upbeat soundtrack that keeps things going. Controls are responsive enough, though the hit detection is unforgiving here, and especially in the later, busier stages. It's not the greatest Harrier clone by a long shot, but Bad Company is a spirited, colourful shooter, a scrappy, budget-friendly blast of forward-firing chaos. Okay, that brings me on to Bad Dudes vs Dragon Ninja. This is, of course, a port of the arcade classic, and is a curious mix of arcade swagger and rough-edged execution. It's a port, of course, of Data East cult brawler, but it never quite lives up to its source. The port has enhanced graphics and sound in some places, but the experience still remains uneven. You glide Blade and Striker through 6 ninja-infested stages, hopping between planes, dishing out punches, kicks, and the occasional weapon pickup. The chunky sprites and the Jean Bardot's driving soundtrack give the game a bold, brash personality, and also does retain the faithful level structure and enemy variety of the arcade original. But it's the controls that are the sticking point. Awkward diagonal controls that's nearly impossible to do, finicky jump kicks and inconsistent collision make the action feel heavier and less responsive than the arcade original. Reviews of the time are all over the place, from praise for its energy to scathing criticism of its roughness. It's flawed but fondly remembered by Amiga owners. Bad Dudes vs Dragon Ninja is a pure late 80s arcade cheese. Loud, silly, and just about entertaining enough for a nostalgic brawl. Then we come to Badlands, released in 1990. This is of course another arcade port of Atari, and there's an apocalyptic twist on the classic Super Sprint formula. The Amiga version captures its gritty arcade personality with surprising fidelity. Based on Atari's 1989 coin-up, it reimagines the top-down sprint racing as a Mad Max-style demolition sport, sending 3 armed cars skidding around 8 hazardous single-screen tracks packed with jumps, collapsing structures, mines and shifting barricades. It has enhanced Amiga graphics and music in places, and its mix of tight cornering, upgradable parts and the series' new combat layer, machine gun bursts to slow rivals in purchasable missiles that can obliterate the competitor outright. Handling here is quick and responsive, offering just enough understeer to reward precision without punishing mistakes too harshly. The course designs, though limited in number, shine through with clever gimmicks, shattered highways and death jumps, junkyard traps and reverse track variants that ramps up the danger. Reviews of the time were wildly split, scores ranging from the 40s all the way up to the 90s, but most agreed that the conversion plays pretty authentic to the original. Overall, it's compact, chaotic and full of character. Badlands remains a satisfying slice of arcade racing mayhem on the Amiga. Oh, really special one this. It is Balance of Power, the 1990 edition, released of course in 1990. There was Balance of Power, the original one, which came out a few years before, but I'm just going to concentrate on the 99 edition because it's essentially the same. They just updated more information. This is a real intelligent geopolitical simulator. Balance of Power places the player in control of either the United States or the Soviet Union during the height of the Cold War. Rather than military conquest, the focus is on political influence, diplomacy and brinkmanship. Every action supporting rebels, influencing elections, imposing sanctions, risks escalating tension towards nuclear war. The game challenges players to walk that delicate tightrope. Too passive and your rival dominates the world map. Too aggressive and global devastation ends the game instantly. This 1990 edition refines the original with updated data, new regions and more polished interface. Though visually minimalistic, its depth is remarkable, demanding critical thinking rather than reflexes. It rewards players who understand the international relations and penalises simplistic decision-making. Balance of Power remains a fascinating study in geopolitical strategy and is one of the more intellectual experiences available on the Amiga. And I adored this. Also, I should note, it came out as a full game on Amiga format, and I absolutely adored this as a kid. I used to play 2-player, handing the disc at school to a mate, and we would play games that way. Awesome. Many fond memories. Okay, let's go on the next one, and it is Ballistix. This is done by Cyclops, of course, the Psygnosis label, and developed by Reflections, of course, went on to do all those classic games like Demolition Derby and Driver. Ballistix is one of the Amiga's most frantic and inventive futuristic sports titles, a wild fusion of air hockey, pinball, and pure chaos. You control a floating cursor that fires streams of metal balls using ricochets to shove a puck through the the twisting arena towards your opponent goal. It sounds simple, but the physics and heavy action turns every match into a fierce, kinetic scramble. So it's basically like digital version of that board game Crossfire we used to fire those ball bearings. Presentation is bold and metallic, with detailed courts packed with hazards, magnets, bumpers, acid pools, hyperspace tunnels and bonus icons that trigger shields, split shots and explosive volleys. In two-player mode, it becomes a gloriously manic game full of barraging and ricocheting shots bouncing unpredictably in every direction as each player tries to wrestle control of the puck. Single player ramps up through dozens of increasingly tricky arenas, replacing the human chaos with gravity and shifting terrain. It's fast, stylish and devilishly addictive. Ballistic remains one of the Amiga's most memorable future sports experiments, simple to grasp, riotous to master. That brings me on to Ballyhoo in 1986, which actually came out in 1987 on the Amiga, and of course published by Infocom. This is a classic Infocom text adventure that transports players to a travelling circus, hiding sinister secret behind its colourful exterior. You play a disillusioned circus goer investigating the kidnapping of the ringmaster's daughter. The writing is vivid and atmospheric, capturing the excitement, grime, and eccentric personalities of circus life. The puzzles here are clever, often requiring close attention to textual clues and understanding how circus equipment acts and functions. As with all Infocom adventures, the parser is sophisticated for its era, enabling nuanced interactions and rewarding players who experiment with verbs and objects. The game's tone balances whimsy with mystery, creating an experience that feels both playful and suspenseful. Though text-only by nature, Ballyhoo remains surprisingly immersive thanks to its strong narrative voice and imaginative world building. It's a must-play for fans of interaction fiction and early adventure game storytelling. Right, onto a real classic here, and this is Banshee, released in 1994 by Core Design. This is one of the Amiga's most renowned top-down shooters, delivering high-octane action wrapped in beautiful hand-drawn visuals, making full use of that AGA graphics colour palette. Set in an alternate 1930s diesel punk universe, the game puts players in the cockpit of a highly manoeuvrable attack plane, battling waves of mechanical enemies and towering bosses. The smooth animation, detailed sprites, and atmospheric backgrounds demonstrate Core Design's technical prowess, and the gameplay is fast and challenging, striking a perfect balance between bullet dodging and tactical target prioritization. It really is the 1943 game that we should have got on the Amiga. Power-ups and weapon upgrades add strategic depth, and while the steady difficulty curve rewards mastery without feeling unfair. Also note the sound design, the thunderous explosions, the great music, rumbling engines and punchy gunfire all enhances the fun and gives you that arcade feel. Banshee feels like the Amiga answer to arcade classics such as the 1940 series or Raiden, but it has its own unique style, and there's so many nice little touches in the background as you see, like the polar bears and the zombies coming out of the grave. There's just so much to see and do as you play through, and you'll always notice new little touches each time you play. For me, this remains one of the most polished and satisfying shooters available on the platform and really needs to be played. Now this is an interesting one. Bar Games, released in 1989 on the Amiga. This is a humorous collection of minigames set in a bar environment, all presented in tongue-in-cheek humour. Each event has its own mechanics requiring timing, precision or quick reflexes. The game shines in multiplayer like most of these sort of games, but its quirky activities still becomes chaotic party fun, even in single player. The exaggerated animations and cartoony characters ooze late 80s charm, and the soundtrack reinforces that barroom atmosphere. Difficulty varies between events, but the variety ensures you're never stuck doing the same thing for long. While it's not a deep experience, its personality and humour and uniqueness, for me, gives it a lasting appeal. Bar Game captures the silly social energy of pub competition surprisingly well, making it a memorable entry in the Amiga lineup of casual multiplayer titles. Right, let's go on to Barbarian, the 1988 Amiga release by Palace Software. Known for its decapitations, hulking warriors, and controversial box art of Maria Whittaker, and also the actor that went on to be Wolf in the UK Gladiator TV show. Barbarian is one of the Amiga's most iconic one-on-one fighters, inspired by sword and sorcery classics. The game pits two gladiator barbarians set against each other in brutal melee combat. It has simple controls, obviously it's just a single button joystick, but the moveset is surprisingly deep, featuring lunges, overhead strikes, and that, of course, infamous spinning attack with the infamous head-chopping swing. Animation is fluid, giving weight to every blow, while the grim arenas enhance the fantasy tone. The game's brutal difficulty and reliance on timing gives it almost a rhythmic quality. Two-player battles, of course, is where it truly shines, offering tense duels full of mind games and those daring head-chopping gambles that you just can't resist to do. Though surpassed by, of course, later fighters, its charm and style and historical impact on the fighting genre endure to this day. It remains a defining title of late 80s Amiga scene, and I love it. And if you do love it, I wanted to note there is a Barbarian Plus fan-made game released in 2018 by Rasta Wizards. This is exactly what long-time fans of Barbarian the Ultimate Warrior had wanted, wishing that the Amiga had received a lavish, faithful, fully modernised retake of the 8-bit classics. This finally unleashes the machine's graphical and audio strengths. Every screen, sprite animation has been rebuilt, giving the game that rich fantasy atmosphere the 1987 version could only hint at. Backgrounds now breathe with subtle animations, lighting and detail, while the fighters' moves with far smoother frame and weightier impact. Crucially, the combat has been tightened. Attacks feel sharper in the remake, movement is quicker and more responsive, and new warriors and arenas add variety without betraying the spirit of the original. The addition of boss fights, cutscenes, and multiple soundtracks, and a tutorial demo modes all elevate the experience. It just simply plays better. Cleaner hit detection, faster reactions, and a more fluid pace make this both nostalgic and wonderful. Barbarian Plus is a definitive Amiga version. It's a fan-driven labour of love that finally realises the potential of that classic game, making it richer, smoother, and far more spectacular. But let's go back to the Palace sequel, which of course is Barbarian II, The Dungeons of Drax. I think in America it was called The Axe of Rage. This takes the infamous head-chopping fighter and transforms it into a single-player hack-and-slash adventure, expanding the world while keeping the series' trademark pulp tone. You play either the axe-wielding barbarian from the first game or Princess Mariana that you rescued in the first game and push you through the wastelands, caverns and dungeons. Flip-screen mazes full of pits, traps and a menagerie of monsters ranging from mutant chickens to cave trolls. Combat is simple but impactful, with high-low strikes and acrobatic kicks, giving the game a scrappy, if clunky, arcade feel. The atmospheric intro and cover art theatrics become iconic, but in-game, the repetitive room layouts and wandering structure do divide players still to this day. Still, the enemy variety and constant tension keep this engaging, especially once you start hunting the magical items needed to face Drax himself. Overall, it's ambitious, uneven, but undeniably memorable. I had to mention it. Barbarian II remains a cult favourite of the late 80s Amiga era. And then this brings us on to Barbarian. No, I've not reading out the same one. This is the one that Psygnosis did in 1987. This is one of their more striking early titles, featuring an atmospheric dungeon-crawling platform adventure dominated by bold Roger Dean artwork and the legendary animated intro of Hagar smashing his chains. The presentation is gorgeous for 1989, with richly painted backdrops and larger character sprites, but once the game begins, the cracks appear. The flick screen movement stops the action dead each time you cross the room, and the unusual icon-based control system using the mouse with the keyboard leads to laggy responses and just awkward combat that's just not fun. Yet despite its flaws, there's something about it. Barbarian does have a strange charm. The underground world of Durgan is filled with lurking monsters, traps, hidden paths, and there's a genuine sense of discovery as you push deeper towards Necron's lair. Barbarian remains a fascinating slice of early Psygnosis ambition. And that brings me on to the sequel, Barbarian II by Psygnosis, that came out in 1991. This expands Psygnosis' original cult adventure into a larger, more ambitious hack-and-slash quest. Once again, you guide Hagar across 6 sprawling regions, forests, caverns, villages, castles, and finally Necron's temple, blending side-on brawling with maze-like exploration. The presentation is classic early 90s. Big sprites, bold colour, and lavish parallax backdrops that give each area a sense of scale, even if the animation is still stiff and that Hagar trademark mincing run is unintentionally comic. Combat is that usual weird clicking affair that slows things down, but there is more multiple weapons and that satisfying roll and strike rhythm. There's shops, keys, light puzzle elements attempting to add depth to the game, and much of the game still revolves around that roaming wide area mapping paths and battering enemies for gold. It's atmospheric, it is repetitive, and it is clunky, but overall I think it's ambitious yet uneven. Barbarian 2 is a rugged slice of Psygnosis fantasy, imperfect striking, and that full, unmistakable early 90s weirdness that was so great of the era. Okay, this brings us on to the Bard's Tale. The Amiga version of the game arrives with all the swagger of an 80s RPG legend, and it was really showing its age. The trademark mix of dungeon crawling, party building and tongue-in-cheek fantasy still has its charm, but the port feels a missed opportunity, more dutiful than dazzling. The Amiga muscle is barely flexed, static visuals, sparse sound and an interface that feels bolted on rather than reimagined for the machine. What does hold up, though, is the game structure, the steady grind of exploration, the thrill of levelling up, and the unmistakable old-school sense of danger around every corner. But compared to slicker RPGs emerging of the time, this one does creak, but I still loved it back in the day because it was an interesting adventures. Reviewers were split on this for good reason. They noted the depth and nostalgia, but also the clunk, repetition, and stubborn refusal to modernise. It's a classic nevertheless, but a classic trapped in amber. And then I want to note the Bard's Tale construction set, which came out 1991-1992. This is a remarkable relic of early 90s creativity, a toolkit that hands players the keys to the classic Bard Tale engine and invites them to build their own first-person RPGs from scratch. You design dungeon layouts, script events, create puzzles, draw or import monster art, craft spells and items, and package the entire thing into a standalone game. It's powerful, flexible, and surprisingly accessible once you grasp its tile-based editor and event system. It also includes a sample adventure called the Starlight Festival that not only teaches the ropes but showcases just how much variety can be squeezed from the construction engine. From sewer crawls to city exploration and cult hunting intrigue, a really interesting construction kit to use. Even so, for would-be designers and dungeon architects, it remains a fascinating and generous creative toolkit, an early, important step towards player-driven RPG design. Okay, then we come on to the sequel, Bard's Tale 2, The Destiny Knight. This takes everything from the original did and expands it into a full-blown epic. Bigger overworld, tougher dungeons, more devious puzzles. You begin in Tengramain, rebuilding your party before venturing across 6 towns and a sprawling wilderness in search of 7 fragments of the Destiny Wand. The first-person exploration remains its old-school charm, but now the game feels wider and more dangerous with traps, riddles, teleport mazes, and brutally hard encounters, pushing your strategy to the limit. Character progression is rich, 8 core classes, advanced spellcasters, monster summoning, and welcome return of Bard's magical instrument tricks. The game's atmosphere, haunted streets, cryptic sages, and impossible dungeons creates a true sense of heroic questing that few contemporaries matched. Expansive, unforgiving, and wonderfully absorbing, Destiny Knight stands as one of the Amiga's most enduring classic RPGs. And that brings us on to The Bard's Tale 3, The Thief of Fate. This game continues with even more ambition and dimension-bending entry in the trilogy, a sprawling finale that sends your party across shattered timelines and ruined worlds in pursuit of the mad god Tarjan. Beginning in the wreckage of Skara Brae, you're quickly granted the new art of chronomancy and flung through portals into realms as varied as ancient Rome, frozen wastelands, and even war-torn Berlin. The sense of scope in the third game is enormous, and the addition of the Geomancer and Chronomancer classes opens up a deeper spellcraft and party strategy. The familiar first-person adventuring remains, which definitely was showing its age, but it is now supported at least by an auto-mapping system, a welcome improvement over the graph paper days where you had to draw it all yourself. Combat is punishing but rewarding, with tougher monster groups and encounters that demand clever spell use and resource management. The game's epic, it is uneven, but undeniably this is a classic game. Thief of Fate delivers a grand, reality-hopping conclusion to one of Amiga's most iconic RPG trilogies. And then we have a Bagon Attack, released in 1992 by Cocktail Vision. This is one of the most unusual and memorable adventure games. A strange cyberpunk romp that blends surreal art, eccentric humour, and early FMV flourishes into a uniquely off-kilter experience that's very, very French. You play a young programmer caught in the middle of an alien invasion, pulled through neon city lights, streets, bizarre laboratories, and an unsettling domain of rubber-faced Bargons. Its interfaces mixes the familiar point-and-click exploration with sudden arcade sections and interruptions, everything from underwater crab fights to frantic laser dodging sequence that will appear without warning and is quite divisive really. What really stands out though is the atmosphere, stylized 2.5D backdrops, peculiar characters, and a tone that swings effortlessly between goofy and unsettling. The puzzles walk that classic cocktail line between clever and occasionally maddening and simply mad, with few definite pixel hunts awaiting to trap the unwary, so be warned. Magazine reception at the time reflected this eccentricity, ranging from high 70s to the mid 90s, while the more critical outlets landed closer to the 50 to 60% bracket. Nevertheless, this is a strange, lopsided yet impossible to forget. Bagon Attack stands as one of the Amiga's most singular sci-fi oddities, stylish in flashes, clumsy in places, and weirdly endearing throughout. And that brings me on to Base Jumpers, released in 1995 by Rasputin. This is one of the Amiga's most inventive and energetic multiplayer platformers, blending vertical climbing, frantic racing, and a daring free-fall mechanics in one chaotic package. Players control cartoonish characters scaling the enormous tower filled with traps, enemies, and moving obstacles. The goal, reach the top before your rivals, then leap off the top of the building and parachute safely down whilst avoiding all the hazards. This two-phase structure adds brilliant variety to the game as tense upward races give way to humorous, unpredictable plummets. The colourful graphics and expressive sprites ooze personality, and while the upbeat soundtrack keeps the momentum high and the frankly weird classical music choices on the CD32 version is strangely endearing, but it is the multiplayer where Base Jumpers truly shines. It delivers hilarious competitive moments as players sabotage each other or risk perilous shortcuts. Controls are responsive through some platforming sequences demanding precision. Despite being overlooked upon release, the game's originality, humour and multiplayer brilliance have earned it a cult following. Base Jumpers remains a unique and joyful highlight in the Amiga library. And that brings me on to Batman the Cape Crusader, released in 1988 by Ocean and developed by Special FX. Before Ocean went full arcade brawler with later Batman titles, Batman the Cape Crusader, influenced by the comic and TV show more, delivered one of the most distinctive action adventures on the Amiga. A comic book come to life. Special effects, clever frame-by-frame presentation makes every room appear as a comic panel, sliding and overlapping as Batman moves. It looks stylish today and was genuinely innovative at its release. The game offers two separate missions, controls, one against the Penguin and one against the Joker, blending light puzzling with item hunts, light combat and exploration. It does become very much a constant stream of enemy beat 'em up at places, which is a bit that does annoy a little. But controls do feel a bit stiff, but you know, once you've mastered them, there is a satisfying rhythm to taking out the constant stream of Gotham villain-filled layers. The Amiga version sports clean, colourful visuals over the 8-bits. It is predominantly an 8-bit game. It has great sound though. I love the intro music with the funked-up Batman theme tune. It's not dramatically better than its 8-bit cousins, but it's interesting, particularly as a lot of people out there only ever played the 8-bit iterations of this game. Overall, it's a quirky, atmospheric and packed with charm. The Caped Crusader might not be the definitive Batman game, but its comic panel, presentation and imaginative structure still stand out as one of Ocean's most inventive superhero adaptations. And you've got to love that fantastic box artwork. Okay, then we come to Batman the Movie, 1989. This was a huge deal for Ocean and the Amiga, really making the Amiga jump to the stratosphere with the Batman movie pack-in that they had. This was one of those rare licensed tie-ins that actually earns its blockbuster status on the Amiga. Unlike many quick and cash in movie conversions, this one feels lavish, ambitious and absolutely packed with variety. A proper showcase of Ocean firing on all cylinders. The game unfolds across several distinct sections: platforming action in the Axis chemical plant, a thrilling Batmobile chase through Gotham streets and a Batwing showdown with the final confrontation with the Joker in the cathedral. Each part brings its own mechanics, while some sequences are tougher than others. The sheer variety keeps things constantly fresh. Graphically, it is a treat with crisp sprites, smooth scrolling and atmospheric cutscenes that nail the tone of Burton's film. The soundtrack, especially on the Amiga, is superb, moody and energetic and perfectly matched to the action. Challenging, stylish and surprisingly cinematic, Batman the Movie remains one of the Amiga's most polished and beloved film tie-ins. Ocean at its prime. Not at its prime though is Batman Returns, developed by Denton Designs. They really should know better. For a film dripping with style and atmosphere and brooding flair, the Amiga version of Batman Returns feels a real letdown. A rushed conversion that never comes close to matching the quality of its console siblings. What should have been a slick winter gothic brawler arrives on the Amiga half-baked with choppy animations, jerky scrolling and levels that feel stitched together on a ticking timeline. The beat-em-up action suffers the most, hit detection is mushy, enemy waves repeat endlessly and Batman himself feels oddly floaty, robbing the combat of any weight. The platform sequences are even clumsier, often fighting the controls more than the villains. Visually, things are muddy and inconsistent as well, with sprites lacking the crisp definition found in the other versions. The audio tries its best, but it can't mask the game's overall lack of polish. Batman Returns on the Amiga should have been a festive treat for fans. Instead, it's a cold, snowy slog that feels more like a missed deadline than the celebration of the Dark Knight. Definitely one that I would want to wear a mask for. Then we come to Battle Chess. This remains one of the Amiga's most iconic showpieces, a game that transformed traditional chess into animated medieval theatre. Every piece springs to life, knights clank across the board in full armour, queens glide with regal flair, and rooks erupt into hulking stone monsters. The capture animations were legendary for the time, humorous, violent and packed with clever film references. The knight versus knight duel echoing Monty Python, The Holy Grail, is still a fan favourite. Aside from the spectacle, the game offers a solid chess engine with 9 skill levels and the option to switch between a clean 2D board for purists. It's slower than modern expectations, but the charm and personality never truly wears off. Okay, yeah, admittedly, you know, once you've seen the animations, maybe they get a bit tiring, but I don't know, I never seem to. I just enjoy them. Very well done. A clever idea executed with style, Battle Chess remains a delightful blend of strategy and spectacle, an Amiga classic that still brings a smile to this day. And that brings us on to the sequel, Battle Chess II, Chinese Chess. This takes the animated spectacle of the original battle chess and shifts it into the world of Zhangji, transforming the familiar formula into something more exotic and tactical. The switch to Chinese chess is bold, with councillors, ministers and cannons replacing the traditional European pieces. A river splits the board in two and the whole game has a faster, more aggressive feel. The animations, new, elaborate and often amusing, give each character its own theatrical flourish, and the mix of 2D and 3D board options let you choose between clarity and cinematic flair. But the sequel isn't without its faults. It has slow disk loading, although it does get better with WHD load, and it slows down especially between frequent battle animations. Newcomers may also find Zhangji's rules bewildering at first, and a lot of people don't know Chinese chess, understandably so. The presentation is polished, the challenge is substantial, and the game feels distinct rather than a simple reskin. Overall, I think it's stylish, unusual and mechanically sharp. Battle Chess 2 remains one of the more intriguing strategy titles on the Amiga's early 90s catalogue. Then we come to Battle Command, the spiritual successor to Carrier Command. But instead of commanding fleets, you're dropped straight into the cockpit of a Mauler assault tank and sent behind enemy lines for a series of high-risk sabotage missions. The game mixes accessible 3D action with light tactical planning. Before each mission, you choose from an oppressive armory, guiding missiles, mortars, decoys, IR systems and more, filling only 4 weapon pods, so loadouts matter. Once deployed, the fully filled polygon 3D engine takes over. For 1990, it's remarkably smooth, with fast-moving enemy armour, helicopters, bases, convoys across mostly flat but convincing battlefield locations. Missions range from hostage rescues to runaway bombs, bridge defences and satellite recoveries, each with its own twist. It's less complex than Carrier Command, but far more immediate and accessible. Closer to Battlezone with a modern flair and a strategic element. Fast, tactical and surprisingly addictive, Battle Command stands as one of Ocean's finest 3D action sim hybrids on the Amiga. Right, then we come to Battle Isle, released in 1991 by Ubisoft. This is one of the Amiga's most defining strategy titles, a clean, elegant and fiercely addictive blend of hex-based tactics and brisk arcade-paced execution. Each scenario unfolds on a neatly drawn island battlefield split vertically into 2 command screens so both sides can plan their moves simultaneously. That simple design choice gives a game a thrilling sense of momentum. Decisions feel urgent, clashes decisive, and every turn plays out like a miniature skirmish wargame brought to life. The unit variety is superb here as well, from infantry and armour to gunboats, aircraft, artillery, each with their clear strengths and vulnerabilities. Learning how to coordinate combined attacks, pinning with tanks, flanking with aircraft, storming bases with infantry quickly becomes second nature. The joystick-driven interface is fast and intuitive, surprisingly, letting the player focus on the battlefield thinking rather than wrestling with the menus and learning the mechanics. It's smart, stylish and endlessly replayable. Battle Isle remains one of the Amiga's most purest and satisfying strategy experiences. And that brings me on to its sequel. There was lots of DLC as well, but Battle Isle 93, The Moon of Chromos, released in 1993, obviously. This is a superb expansion campaign pack that takes the original brilliant split-screen hex-based warfare and sharpens it into a tougher, more atmospheric lunar conflict. Set on the moon of Chromos, it introduces low-gravity terrain, crater fields, and icy plains that subtly change how units maneuver and engage. Hover tanks skim over obstacles, artillery benefits from dramatic elevation shifts, and choke points now become even more desperate to contest. The new scenarios are challenging, tightly designed, and much more aggressive than those in the base game, often throwing you into asymmetrical battles where clever positioning and supply awareness matter more than ever. Despite being just a data disc, Battle Isle 93 feels a genuine sequel, a true evolution, more varied maps, smarter enemy setups, and a strategic rhythm that rewards careful, forward-thinking play. It's compact, polished, and and strategically rich, Battle Isle 93 stands as one of the finest add-ons of the Amiga era, an essential companion to the original classic. That brings us on to Battlehawks 1942, released in 1989. This remains one of the Amiga's most respected and early flight simulators by Lucasfilm, and it's a dramatic recreation of the Pacific Air War, created with genuine passion for history. You fly as either the US Navy or a Japanese pilot across 4 crucial carrier battles of 1942, Coral Sea, Midway, Eastern Solomons and Santa Cruz. Each mission starting with an excellent briefing that sets the tone before dropping you straight into the cockpit. No takeoff required, and that's what I love. The controls are simple but satisfying, using smooth mouse-driven flight with realistic touches like stalling, damage modelling, fuel management and constant tension of enemy fighters slipping behind your tail. Sprites, though basic, are effective, conveying the speed and danger, while the stereo sound, engine pitch changes, gun rattles and explosive hits really adds to the atmosphere. It really feels like you're in the action. But worthy of noting, the real star is the remarkable manual, a 100-page illustrated history lesson that elevates the whole experience. This is a pioneering, deeply immersive sim. Battlehawks 1942 still soars as one of Lucasfilm's finest Amiga achievements. Okay, that brings me on to Battle Squadron, released in 1989 by Electronic Zoo. When Amiga owners boast about arcade quality shooters, Battle Squadron is usually the first name they drop, and for good reason. This vertical blaster is blisteringly fast, beautifully presented, firefights that still stand as one of the system's all-time greats. From the moment you launch into the alien-infested atmosphere of the Barracks Empire, the action barely lets up. Waves of vividly drawn enemies sweep in with ruthless precision, while ground installations spew fire in every direction. The controls are silky smooth, the game's colourful, it has a wonderful power-up system, especially those glorious Nova bombs, keeping the action satisfyingly explosive. Graphically, Battle Squadron is pure Amiga showboating, with bold colours, huge sprites, layered backgrounds and a sense of speed rarely matched in 1989. It's tough, polished and endlessly replayable. Battle Squadron remains a crown jewel in the Amiga shooter lineup, a triumph of intensity and style. Now, one thing I wanted to note is Battle Squadron II, which was a fan-made homebrew release in 2024. 3 decades after Battle Squadron, yet the Amiga shooter benchmark Battle Squadron II crash lands on the scene as an unexpected and entirely unofficial labour of love. Built as a public domain homage rather than a commercial sequel, it surprisingly captures much of the Capcom's classic spirit while adding its own experimental flavour. The trademark vertical blasting is intact, chunky alien aircraft, swarming formations and dense ground installations ready to shred the unwary. While the game's graphics lean naturally towards the more AGA era hobbyist charm than the late 80s commercial sheen, there's a real affection here in the sprite work and level styling. The scrolling is smooth, explosions satisfying, and the difficulty is pleasantly fierce. The sound effects pack a retro punch, with a soundtrack that channels the original's energy rather than imitates it outright. Controls are tight and responsive, making this instantly pick up and play. As a fan-driven spiritual successor, Battle Squadron 2 delivers exactly what it sets out to do. More enemies, more firepower, more carnage, and the heartfelt salute to the Amiga shooter royalty. Okay, that brings us on to Battle Master 1990, published by Mirrorsoft. Battle Master strides onto the Amiga as an ambitious blend of action, strategy, and fantasy adventuring. And while not every element lands perfectly, there's enough depth and charm here to hook the players who enjoy a bit of tactical thinking with their sword swinging. You choose from 4 fantasy races: human, elf, dwarf and orc, each with their own unique strengths. Then they roam a sprawling map filled with villages, monsters, dungeons and rival warbands. The game shifts between overhead exploration and frantic, slightly chaotic real-time battles where positioning your squad can matter as much as brute force. Controls take some time to get used to, but there's a genuine sense of progression and you recruit allies and build up your army. Graphically, Battle Master is colourful and does the job. if basic. It does have, though, nicely detailed sprites and a solid fantasy vibe. Overall, with its quirky mix of arcade action and light strategy, Battlemaster stands as an intriguing, unusual entry into the Amiga fantasy lineup. A flawed but full of personality of its era. Here's an interesting one. Battleships, released in 1987 by Elite. This takes the classic pencil and paper naval duel of the Amiga, wrapping it into a chunky, colourful graphic and surprisingly slick interface for the strategy game of the late 80s. Everything is here, plotting ship positions, scanning grid lines, calling out shots, and that unmistakable thrill when you land a hit and start hunting down the rest of a doomed destroyer. The presentation is clean, simple, with bright boards, smooth cursor movement and satisfying explosions when your guesses pay off. The computer opponent is competent enough to keep things interesting, though matches can feel a touch slow if you're used to the faster paced titles. But of course it's the solid 2-player where this comes to play, although you can't help but feel with 2-player you might as well be playing it on paper and pen, but I guess at least it has more visual flair. Whilst it's not the most dazzling Amiga release, Battleships delivers exactly what it sets out to do and promises, with easy to grasp, quietly addictive naval strategy with a polished home computer sheen over the paper and pen original. And that brings us on to Battlestorm. Battlestorm is an early Titus action title that mixes top-down shooting with light strategy, dropping you into a futuristic war zone where you command a hover through enemy-infested landscapes. It's unmistakably late 80s in feel, blocky visuals, tight arenas, that relentless pushing and punishing arcade pace Titus were known for before their platformers took centre stage. The gameplay is straightforward but hectic. You skim over the terrain, blasting defence turrets, avoiding swarms of enemies and keeping close eye on fuel while hunting down key objectives. The scrolling is pretty smooth and the vehicle controls, although a little stiff, you do get used to it, and it does give a feeling of weight to the tank, which is good when doing the combat. Graphics are bold and colourful, with Titus' familiar art style peeking through in the sprite work. Sound effects are basic but serviceable, and the music, when it appears, is chirpy enough to keep the action energised. Battlestorm won't dethrone the Amiga's heavyweight shooters, but as an early blaster it delivers a surprisingly engaging, if no frills, dose of a futuristic tank mayhem. And that brings me on to BattleTech, the Crescent Hawk Inception, released in 1989 by Infocom and developed by Westwood Associates, who of course went on to do fantastic Command & Conquer games, etc., and Dune itself. Long before Westwood reinvented real-time strategy, they cut their teeth on this atmospheric, story-driven BattleTech RPG, and the Amiga version remains one of the more polished additions. You play Jason Youngblood, a mech warrior in training whose world is shattered when the Curitans attack Pacifica. From there, the game blends exploration, tactical combat, and surprisingly engaging narrative rooted in the BattleTech universe. The overhead adventuring sections are well drawn and cleanly animated, offering a nice mix of character interaction, item hunting, and light puzzle solving. Combat shifts into excellent turn-based tactical mode, while mech positioning, armour angles and weapon heat matter far more than trigger-happy blasting. It's a slow, methodical game, but a richly satisfying one once mastered. The Amiga version boasts crisp graphics, smooth menus and solid sound. It's understated but fitting for the game's serious tone. It's not fast nor for arcade fans, but the Crescent Hawk Inception stands as a thoughtful, atmospheric mech warrior prequel, an early glimpse of Westwood's rising talent. And it's a shame that the Amiga never ever saw the sequel of Crescent Hawk Revenge. Okay, let's go on to Battletoads, released in 1994 and developed by Rare. When Battletoads finally limped onto the Amiga in 1994, it should have been a late generation showpiece. Instead, it arrived as one of the system's most infamous hatchet job conversions, and a real shame to the Rare label. What was a fast, irrelevant, brilliantly animated console classic becomes on the Amiga a sluggish, crippled echo of the original. The fun, Rare visual visuals are technically here, but everything moves at half speed with jerky scrolling and notably cut down animation frames. Combat, once frantic and satisfying, feels sluggish and unresponsive, robbing the Toads' exaggerated smackdowns of all impact. Even the legendary Turbo Tunnel goes from white-knuckle challenge to borderline unplayable due to its terrible frame rate and sluggish controls. Audio also takes a big hit. The Amiga audio hardware is barely used, leaving the once iconic soundtrack sounding thin and lifeless. As a conversion of Battletoads, the Amiga feels rushed, underpowered and shockingly unpolished, particularly as Rare's name was against it. This is considered a classic on the consoles, but on the Amiga it's a croaker. Okay, then we come to Bazer and Runt. This came out as a public domain game and came out in 1992. This offers a light-hearted, fun game built around two cheerful, cheeky characters navigating hazard-filled levels. While simple concept, the game distinguishes it with smooth controls, clean graphics and a playful sense of humour. Each level introduces a gimmick, moving platforms, tricky jumps, enemy swarms that keeps the gameplay varied despite its public domain origins. The sprite work is surprisingly expressive, and the environments have a colourful charm typical of the Amiga on the early 90s. Difficulties ramp up though, and it steadily makes the later stages genuinely challenging without feeling unfair. It's not a commercial release and it does show it, but I think it really showcases the creativity of the Amiga public domain scene, demonstrating how much personality and polish small developers could achieve. It might not be as well known as mainstream titles, but for players exploring the public domain library, it remains a delightful little gem worth experiencing. Okay, let's go on to Beach Volley. This is an ocean interesting title that oozes summer charm while never taking itself too seriously. Ocean France brought a wonderfully light-hearted style to this arcade sports outing, sending you on a globe-trotting volleyball tour packed with colourful backdrops, quirky courts, and opponents ranging from the tough to the downright eccentric. The gameplay is simple but snappy. Two-player controls let you dive, spike, and set with surprising precision. And once you get into the rhythm, it becomes fast, frantic, and fun. Matches are short, arcade-tight, and enjoyable. Visually, though, the Beach Volley shines with bold sprites, vibrant scenery, and the unmistakable Ocean France polish. The music is equally upbeat, while giving the whole experience a cheerful holiday vibe. It's not the deepest, almost playable sports game on the Amiga, but Beach Volley is nevertheless a breezy, charming, and undeniably bitter fun. A perfect pick-up-and-play summer hit. And that brings me on to Beast Busters, released in 1989. The Amiga port of SNK's arcade shooter Beast Busters brings the zombie-blasting, monster-splattering mayhem to the home computers with admirable enthusiasm. A rail shooter at heart, it places players behind the crosshairs as waves of undead creatures and grotesque mutants swarm the screen. While the Amiga version can't match the arcade speed or sprite volume, it still delivers frantic action with chunky artwork, atmospheric sound effects, and pulpy B-movie tone. And of course, it really helps having the Amiga mouse to control the crosshairs. Each stage introduces new enemy types and environmental hazards, keeping things lively throughout. And boss battles are a highlight here, delivering oversized monstrosities that demand quick reflexes and quick trigger fingers. There's two-player co-op, of course, and this amplifies the fun, making the game a great pickup for short, chaotic sessions. Though technically limited on the hardware, the conversion does capture the spirit of the SNK cult classic. For fans of shooters, horror aesthetics, or arcade nostalgia, Beast Busters offers a rowdy, enjoyable experience on the Amiga. Okay, let's go on to Beavers, released in 1994. This splashes onto the Amiga with a sort of bright, bouncy confidence of Amiga platformers of the mid-90s. Now, don't be put off by the initial forced scrolling platforming of the opening level, because it does switch to a more traditional platform game as you continue to play. This is just a beautifully bright, bouncy, fun, colourful, clean side-scrolling action built around timing, exploration, a handful of simple interactions. Each stage is a colourful playground of lifts, switches, critters and hazards, and while the controls have that slight floaty Amiga Euro platformer feel, the game settles into a satisfying rhythm once you're in the groove. The visuals are pure cartoon charm, full of colourful sprites and expressive animations. The soundtrack keeps things upbeat without being syrupy, and a few levels lean on repetition. There's an undeniable warmth to the whole package that I love, and I love the music as well. Beavers is a polished, friendly and quietly confident, a likeable platformer that knows its lane and sticks the landing. Okay, this is a real classic. It is Beneath a Steel Sky, released in 1994, published by Virgin and of course developed by Revolution Software. This is one of the greatest adventure games ever released, not only on the Amiga but across the gaming world. Beneath a Steel Sky immerses players with a dystopian cyberpunk future brought to life with stunning pixel art and sharp writing. Designed by Charles Cecil, who of course went on to do the Broken Sword games, and comic book legend Dave Gibbons, who of course most famously did the artwork for the Watchmen graphic novel. The game follows Robert Foster as he unravels conspiracies with a twisted corporate-controlled megacity. The world building is exceptional. Oppressive factories, decaying streets and towering complexes form the visually striking backdrop. The dialogue is witty, often darkly comedic, and delivered by a memorable cast, including Joey, Foster's sarcastic robot companion that you just can't help but love. Puzzles are logical and satisfying without the unfair obscurity common in contemporaries. Amiga version retains the excellent graphics and sound, and despite the hardware limitations, it still offers an engaging, atmospheric and narratively rich game. And of course on the CD32 version you had brilliant voice acting as well. Beneath the Steel Sky is a shining example of point-and-click design and one of the Amiga's true masterpieces. It remains highly recommended for fans of story-driven adventures and gamers of today. These days I would probably play it. It is completely free on GOG.com. So if you've got a PC, you can probably play it there, and it's probably the easiest way to play it. It also includes all the extra content, such as the fantastic David Gibbons comic that was given with the game, and of course the brilliant manual. Okay, let's go on to the next one. It is Benefactor, released in 1994 by Psygnosis. This is a beautifully crafted puzzle platformer that blends action, strategy and rescue-based gameplay into an exceptionally polished package. You play as Ben E. Factor, tasked with freeing trapped merry men across a wide range of imaginative levels. The game cleverly alternates between pure platforming and puzzling, requiring players to navigate hazards while manipulating switches, ropes, lifts and environmental mechanisms. The merry men behave with amusing unpredictability, adding both charm and challenge to the proceedings. Graphics are crisp and colourful, showcasing the digital illusions, later of course known as dice, early brilliance, while the soundtrack provides a bright and adventurous energy to the proceedings. The level designs escalate in complexity, becoming a real head-scratcher, and encourages thoughtful planning, while still rewarding dexterity. Benefactor strikes a perfect balance, demanding enough to satisfy puzzle fans, yet lively and responsive enough to appeal to action players. It stands as one of Psygnosis' most polished and underrated titles on the Amiga, and it needs to be played by more. Then we have Better Dead Than Alien, released in 1988. This is a light-hearted, humour-packed shoot-'em-up. Better Dead Than Alien casts players as the editor of a sci-fi magazine battling invading aliens. The game is a single screen with colourful backdrops and a wonderful update to the fantastic Space Invader, but adding a tongue-in-cheek tone with visible, silly alien designs, comic book splash screens and goofy sound effects. It all sets it apart from more serious shooters. Gameplay is straightforward, but there's a satisfying power-ups, enhancements, enemy waves, demand reflexes and memorization, and the scoring system encourages aggressive, repetitive play. It's not as polished as later Amiga shooters, but it's one that I've always held close to my heart. It's got charm and energy and remains appealing throughout. I think it just gives it a personal, cheerful personality that contrasts it with its frantic gameplay. For fans of early Amiga arcade shooters, Better Dead Than Alien offers an enjoyable experience with bags of character. Okay, then we get Beverly Hills Cop, 1990. Oh dear, done by Tynesoft. Yes, they had a habit of turning movie licenses into mixed bags. But Beverly Hills Cop lands firmly on the wrong side of the badge. Instead of a cohesive action game, you get 4 disjointed mini-missions, shooting gallery, driving, platforming, and a final showdown, none of which feels particularly finished or connected. The shooting sections are clunky and sluggish, with enemies that pop up like cardboard cutouts. The driving stage, which should have been the highlight, suffers from jerky scrolling and almost no sense of speed. Platforming, floaty jumps and stiff controls make Axel Foley feel more like he's wading through syrup than busting bad guys. Graphically, it's serviceable at best. Bland backgrounds, repetitive sprites. The music does try to invoke the spirit of the movie, particularly the title music is a fantastic version of Axel Foley's music, but it never gets anywhere near that iconic Harold Faltermeyer's vibe. Few ideas in this game do show promise, but ultimately Beverly Hills Cop is a messy, unpolished licensed job, more a straight to VHS than a big screen blockbuster. Then we have Beyond the Ice Palace, released in 1988 for Elite. Released during the height of the Ghost and Goblins craze, Beyond Ice Palace feels very much like Elite's attempt to capture that formula. And on the Amiga, the results are mixed but charming slice of fantasy action, although it really is an 8-bit game in its at home with. You guide a brave warrior through cursed forests, crumbling ruins and monster-infested caves, armed with throwable weapons and a wonderfully oddball Spirit of the Forest power-up that summons a guardian to wipe the screen. The game moves at a brisk pace with tight controls and responsive jumping, makes it more forgiving than the Capcom inspiration. Visuals are crisp and colourful for an 88 release, with attractive backdrops and neatly drawn sprites. The soundtrack, though simple, has a memorable, mystical tone that suits the setting well as well. It is a difficult game, but it is fair, I think, and whilst it's a short adventure, it's packed with that addictive, just one more go quality that I loved from the 8-bit days. Beyond the Ice Palace is no arcade giant, but an early Amiga platformer that is spirited, enjoyable quest that still holds its charm. Okay, then we have Beyond Zork, the Coconut of Quendor, released in 1987 and of course published and developed by Infocom. This marks the moment Infocom took the bold step beyond pure text adventures, weaving light RPG mechanics into the classic Zork formula, and the Amiga version delivers one of the most polished presentations of this ambitious hybrid. You're off on a quest for the legendary Coconut of Quendor, but this time your adventurer has stats, inventory slots, armour, and even the occasional semi-randomised encounter. The familiar Infocom prose shines with witty, sharp and delightfully absurd dialogue, and in that unmistakable Zorkian way. The Amiga's tidy screen layout, soft colours and optional mouse-driven menus make navigating this sprawling fantasy world smoother than almost any other platform, and the interface's automap is particularly welcome, offering new players to keep their bearings. Beneath the humour lies a surprisingly deep adventure with puzzles, tactical combat, magical mishaps, and a world packed with clever writing. Beyond Zork isn't just a sequel, it's Infocom experimenting and evolving, and the Amiga port does it justice. Then we have Big Business, released in 1990. This is one of the Amiga management sims that aimed high, offering a full corporate empire building experience long before the genre found its stride. You're dropped in the executive chair and tasked with running every aspect of the company: production, marketing, pricing, research, logistics, all while trying to outmaneuver rival firms who are just as ruthless as you are. Visually, it's a classic early 90s German design, clean screen, sharp icons and no-nonsense interface, but gets the job done, but with a cute, sort of like cartoon feel to the characters. It does still, though, feel a little stiff and clinical. But the depth is impressive for the era. Factory optimization, market demand curves, transportation routes. But the game isn't great at explaining itself. It does need you to read the manual, and it makes the learning curve steeper than it needs to be. Still, once the systems all click, Big Business becomes surprisingly absorbing. It's a slow burn strategy, no doubt, but it does have a real bite, rewarding careful planning over flashy presentation. Not the slickest simulator on the Amiga, but a satisfying and interesting one for armchair CEOs. Okay, then we have Big Nose the Caveman, released in 1992 by Codemasters. Codemasters brought a lot of the 8-bit budget excitement to the Amiga in the early 90s, and Big Nose the Caveman is a perfect example. Bright, bouncy, slightly chaotic platforming with that unmistakable budget label charm. You guide Big Nose, all nose, hair and attitude, across prehistoric islands while smashing enemies with a club, grabbing bones and leaping across tricky platforms. The Amiga version looks colourful enough, if a little cheap, but it does have large sprites and busy backgrounds. It doesn't quite have the smoothness of the console ports or the acceptability of the 8-bits. Scrolling still remains a little choppy in collision detection and occasionally drifts into cheap hit territory. Still, the level design has its moments with hidden sections and plenty to collect, and it's just charmful, really. Audio is also cheerful but unremarkable. I mean, catchy in short bursts, repetitive over long sessions. Control-wise, the jump up does take some getting used to. It's got that floaty Amiga feel, but once mastered, you'll get in the grip of it and start mastering the particular way it jumps. It's not Codemasters' finest Amiga outing, but Big Nose the Caveman, it remains a fun, energetic budget platformer with loads of character and loads of club-swinging chaos. Okay, let's go on to the next one. It is The Big Red Adventure, 1995, and this drags you back into the chaotic lives of Doug, Donna and Dino, and this time stumbling through post-Soviet Russia in a world that looks like a political cartoon gone feral. The hand-drawn art is loud, exaggerated and packed with detail, giving the game a personality that most mid-90s adventures could only dream of. The humour swings between sharp satire, outright silliness, and while not every gag lands, the sheer commitment to the bit keeps it entertaining throughout. The downside is the interface. It's got clunky menus, awkward hotspots, and puzzles that occasionally feel like they were designed after a long night out. Still, there's charm and madness to it all, and I love it for that. The Amiga version holds together better than expected. It is messy, but it's colourful, unpredictable. It is flawed, but it's memorable. An adventure that refuses to play it safe, and I love it for that. Okay, let's go on to Big Run, released in 1991. This is, of course, based on the arcade port and throws you straight into the Paris-Dakar rally with the dust, heat and mechanical abuse that implies. This is, of course, the Jalico home port on the Amiga, and this version keeps the arcade structure intact with short, brutal stages, tight checkpoints and constant fight to keep your car in one piece. The presentation is bold, it's got great recreation of the sprites and a decent sense of speed. Though the scaling is rough and the roadside objects pop like they're being dropped from a crane, it's rather surprising given that Storm were involved with this port. Handling is also twitchy, but it is workable, and when you get into the vibe, it really is a fun, interesting game. But push too hard and the car starts to fall apart mid-race. Of course, like its arcade parent, it's not a deep racer, but there is a certain drive-forward momentum that keeps you hooked for another attempt. I think it's a lively, slightly uneven conversion, but it still delivers a solid Dakar-style blast. And that brings me on to Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, 1991. This lands on the Amiga with the same spaced-out grin as the film, but the game never quite finds itself. It has everything that you'd expect in the adventure game. You hop through time, collecting historical figures, dodging guards and solving light puzzles, but it all feels oddly flat, and the weird maze arcade sections just don't really work. The controls are stiff, the collision detection is temperamental, and the isometric layout makes simple navigation more work than it should be. But it is charmful in its presentation, with bright sprites, lively locations, and a soundtrack that tries its best at capturing the movie. But the pacing isn't quite right in the game. The objectives feel like busy work. There's fun here in short bursts, but often you're bored and frustrated with what you have to do with a lot of backtracking. Still, especially if you're fond of the movie, there is some fun here, despite it never building momentum. Overall, it's a curious tie-in with a few bright moments, but it doesn't deliver the energy or personality that made the film such a cult favourite. Okay, this is a good one. Bill's Tomato Game, released in 1992 and published by Psygnosis. This is a wonderfully inventive physics puzzle game. Bill's Tomato Game challenges players to guide a tomato safely across hazardous obstacles using springs, fans, conveyors, trampolines, and more. Each level is a Rube Goldberg-style contraption where players position tools before triggering the run and watching the chaos unfold. The game's cheerful presentation, expressive animation, and bright colour palette give it instant charm, and the puzzles grow steadily more complex. It's quite a good puzzle game as well, all requiring careful placement and experimentation. Success feels immensely satisfying. Each perfectly timed chain reaction connects and gives you that buzz as you watch your tomato get to the other end. Despite being less known than other Psygnosis titles, Bill's Tomato Game is a hidden gem, polished, imaginative, and endlessly replayable. Then we have Bionic Commando, released in 1990 by US Gold, and it was a software creations pool. This lands on the Amiga with a premise that feels so bold. No jumping, just a mechanical arm that flings you across like a human grappling hook, like its arcade parent. And when it works, it's a rush, swinging over gaps, grabbing ledges at the last second, and with a rhythm that feels unlike anything else from the era. The trouble is, the port isn't that great. The controls are stiff, the collision detection is temperamental, and the pacing never quite matches the arcade punch. The visuals are serviceable, but the lack of clarity needed for a game built around precision movement. There's satisfaction perhaps in mastering the arm, and the layouts of the levels have flashes of smart design of its arcade parent, but the Amiga version feels rushed and it never fully clicks. It's an interesting oddity to see it on the Amiga. It does have the strong arcade core idea, but it's held back by a poor conversion that doesn't give the idea room to shine. Okay, then we go on to Bio Challenge. This arrived on the Amiga during the golden age of cinematic platformers, and it fits into that mould. Part action, part puzzle, part atmospheric adventure. You play a bio-engineered hero escaping from an alien facility, leaping through hazardous environments, hacking machines and blasting mutant life forms while unravelling the story of your creation. The game is unmistakably Delphine flavoured. It has a great animation, moody backdrops, and a sense of character movement as you run through blasting all the enemies. It's not as fluid as Flashback or Another World, but it does play as an enjoying forebear to those classics. Visually, it's very striking throughout, as you'd expect. Glowing tubes, pulsating biotech corridors, and detailed sprites that feel alive. Presentation helps enormously too, with eerie ambience and sharp effects that enhance the game's tension. It's tough, occasionally unforgiving, but deeply atmospheric. Bio Challenge stands as a stylish, underrated entry in the Amiga sci-fi platforming canon. Okay, then we get Biplane Duel, released in 1989 and as a public domain game. This is a lightweight but enjoyable PD game of aerial combat single screen, very much a remake of the Intellivision classic Biplanes. Biplanes Duel pits two human players against each other in frantic dogfights across a single screen arena. The controls are responsive and accessible, make it easy to pick up and play, and it's so good in two-player, with it really being competitive. Each round is quick, chaotic, and ideal for multiplayer sessions, and learning to do the stall to go very quick and then come up and shoot your enemy is paramount. Despite the minimalistic graphics, the game captures the excitement of the swooping dives, loop-the-loops, and last-second evasions. Whilst it has no solo experience, thankfully the sequel, which I'll just mention here, of the Salmon Pink Max, actually gives you a single player version of the same game, which of course allows you to at least enjoy it without another fellow human enjoying the proceedings. Okay, let's go on to Birds of Prey, released in 1992 by Electronic Arts and developed by Argonaut Software. This is a kind of flight sim that doesn't just hand you a cockpit, it hands you an entire air force. You get more than 40 aircraft to fly, from nimble fighters to lumbering bombers, each with its own handling quirks, a cockpit layout. The scale is impressive. The Amiga version holds up well with crisp visuals, smooth horizon movement, and a world big enough to get lost in. Missions range from simple patrols to full-blown strike runs, and the game expects you to pay attention. Fuel, altitude, radar, weapons loadout, it's all in play. Thus, it makes it a really steep learning curve, and one I struggle with to go back to today. But I love this back in the day, because once you learn the interface, it just clicks and it plays so well. Overall, it's an ambitious, demanding, packed with depth, and it's one of the Amiga's standout sims. Okay, then we have the Black Cauldron, which came out a year later on 1987 on the Amiga. It's, of course, based on Disney's darker than usual animated film, and Sierra the Black Cauldron is a charming entry in the AGI adventure series and one of the most accessible Sierra titles ever made. Unlike the parser-heavy King Quest games, this was designed for younger or first-time adventurers, and so uses an icon-driven interface and simplified controls, perfect for that Amiga mouse. In the game, you play Taran, the would-be hero of Prydain, in a light fantasy quest that mixes exploration, item use puzzles, and gentle danger. The 16-bit colour graphics look bright and clean on the Amiga, with smooth screen transitions and Sierra's trademark, slightly clunky animation. Whilst simple, the world is surprisingly atmospheric, capturing forests, huts, moors, and the Horned King's fortress convincingly. What makes Black Cauldron special is its branching structure. There's multiple solutions to the game, optional sequences, and several ways to finish the story, which of course is really rare for adventures of the time. The music is modest, but the game's warmth, approachability, and storybook charm make it an overlooked delight in the Amiga adventure lineup. Okay, Black Crypt is one of the Amiga's premier first-person dungeon crawlers. A richly atmospheric and technically impressive game that rivals Dungeon Master while adding its own creative flair. Raven Software is the developer, of course, the people that went on to do Hexen and Heretic and now Call of Duty, and they crafted a world here with devious traps, intricate puzzles, an impressive roster of monsters rendered with detailed animation. Party creation encourages experimentation across 4 classes, each with spells or abilities that dramatically influence combat strategy. The dungeon layouts grow increasingly complex, incorporating teleporters, hidden switches, pressure plates, and multi-floor challenges that require careful mapping. Combat is fast and engaging, rewarding reflexes as much as tactics. The sound design also stands out. Thundering monster roars and eerie ambient tones heighten the game's immersion. Boss encounters provide dramatic difficulty spikes and memorable set pieces. Black Crypt is polished, challenging, superbly designed, and represents the Amiga dungeon crawler at its very best, and cemented Raven Software as their early reputation for their continual ongoing excellence. Okay, then we get Black Dawn, released in 1994. This combines the claustrophobic exploration of a dungeon crawler with a futuristic tension of sci-fi combat. Players pilot a strike craft through a labyrinth corridors filled with enemy drones, turrets, and environmental hazards. The game blends fast-paced shooting with resource management, as fuel, ammo, and shield power must be carefully preserved to survive each mission. The gritty, metallic visuals and strobing light effects create a moody, atmospheric world, while the soundtrack pulses with military urgency. Controls are responsive while making it satisfying to zip through the corridors, blast enemies, and locate critical objectives. Missions grow more complex with branching paths and multi-step goals that encourage exploration. And whilst minimalist compared to other sci-fi titles, Black Dawn delivers a tight, engaging experience full of tension and action. It remains a notable entry in the Amiga catalogue of futuristic dungeon crawlers. That brings me on to the sequel, Black Dawn 2, which was a licenseware product by Andy Campbell. Black Dawn 2 continues the Amiga cult favourite sci-fi dungeon crawler with more corridors, more characters, and more of that gritty, claustrophobic atmosphere that made the original such a hit. Running on a smooth pseudo 3D engine, this sequel feels faster, cleaner, and more polished. A clear step up from its predecessor, even if it remains profoundly underground. You guide your Marine squad through a labyrinth of alien-infested bases, navigating each grid step by step by juggling weapons, ammo, keycards, and dwindling health. The interface is clean and surprisingly intuitive, letting you focus on exploration and tense shootouts. Enemies appear with little warning, making every corner turn a potential panic moment. Graphics are functional but effective. Dark metallic walls, flickering lights, and well-defined sprites. It all adds that sort of mid-90s Amiga atmosphere that we all love. Sound contributes greatly as well, with heavy weapons, thudding and eerie ambient sounds ramping up the tension. It's tough, moody, and unmistakably Amiga scene. Black Dawn 2 may not be Dungeon Master in space, but it is nevertheless a hugely enjoyable slice of indie sci-fi crawling. And that brings us on to Black Dawn Rebirth, released in 1997. A follow-up to the original, Black Dawn Rebirth is a polished, ambitious public domain release that impressively expands the series' core concept. Retaining the futuristic dungeon crawler structure, it offers more intricate levels, improved enemy design, and a greater variety of weapons and pickups. The controls remain smooth, allowing players to weave through tight corridors while blasting enemies with satisfying precision. A notable improvement is the level variety. Mission layouts are more maze-like and incorporated numerous secrets, encouraging multiple playthroughs, and sound effects are again punchy, and the music enhances with the darker, more brooding tones of the gameplay. Whilst it is a PD game, Rebirth shows remarkable dedication to its amateur developers, and it's a testament to the creativity of the Amiga community and stands as one of the most accomplished public domain titles on the system. And that brings me on to Black Dawn Technomage, released in 2022. 3 decades after the original classic, Black Dawn Technomage brings the franchise roaring into the modern Amiga era, and it's easily one of the most strongest releases of the contemporary retro scene, running on an enhanced Black Dawn engine first showcased in Rebirth. Technomage delivers slick, fast, atmospheric sci-fi dungeon crawling that feels both classic and freshly polished. The pseudo 3D grid engine is smooth on real hardware, with improved lighting, richer environments, and excellent sprite work. Corridors feel tense and oppressive, enemies strike hard, and weapons now carry a real firepower. Exploration remains the heart of the series. Locked doors, terminals, hidden caches, and labyrinth-themed layouts all reward careful mapping. Audio, again, is a highlight, with moody, ambient tones setting the scene, and those satisfying big sci-fi blasts giving the gamer thick, in-the-action atmosphere. The improved interface and inventory here also make it far more approachable than those early 90s entries, but still keeps that old-school crunch. Overall, Technomage is a superb step forward. It's dark, stylish, challenging, and proudly Amiga through and through to its core. It's a must for dungeon crawler fans, and proof that the machine's modern scene is live and thriving. And that brings us on to Black Tiger, released in 1990. This is of course based on the arcade port of the same name and was published by US Golden, a Tiertex developed title. This hits the Amiga with all the gothic swagger of the Capcom arcade original, but the conversion can't keep the pace of the source. The core loop survives intact, exploring caverns, smashing monsters, rescuing old men who shower you with gear and keep your coin stash healthy enough to buy upgrades. The problem is the port, the execution. The visuals are muddy, the animation lacks weight, and the controls never feel as sharp and polished as they need to be for a game built around tight platforming and constant pressure. Enemies soak up hit hazards, blend into the background, and pacing loses the snap that made the arcade version feel so Moorish. There's still some enjoyment powering up your armour and carving through the later stages, but ultimately the Amiga port never really captures the arcade arcade essence. It's a playable effort, but far from the definitive version. And that brings us on to Black Viper, released in 1996 by Neo. This is one of those late-era Amiga releases that feel like it arrived from a parallel universe where the machine still had a few years left in it. It's a futuristic bike racer shooter, key bikes, neon-lit tracks, and a tone that sits somewhere between Road Rash and French cyberpunk comic. The game moves at a decent clip, the weapons pack enough punch to matter, and the track layouts throw in just enough hazards to keep you alert. The downside is the handling. The bikes feel heavy and a little clunky. You feel almost glued to the road, and it takes time to get comfortable with the way to swing into the corners. Still, presentation is stylish, the music's good, and the whole thing has a confident attitude that helps it stand out. It's by no means a classic, but it's surprisingly engaging late period Amiga racer and worth a play today. And that brings us on to Blade Warrior, released in 1991. This is one of the Amiga's most stylish and atmospheric adventures, a haunting hybrid of side-scrolling combat and lightweight RPG mechanics wrapped in a striking silhouette art style that did it long before Limbo and things like that. Everything, your hero, the monsters, the towers, and jagged landscape is all rendered in shadow against a shifting night sky, creating a look unlike anything else on the system. It's simple but incredibly effective, giving the world a brooding, almost mythic ambience. You roam a vast map, collecting spell ingredients, trading with wizards, and hunting down several fragments of an ancient tablet needed to challenge the evil Merc. Combat feels weighty, with lumbering monsters emerging suddenly from the darkness, while your growing spellbook provides essential boosts, shortcuts, and survival tools to help you beat the game. It's moody, inventive, and unmistakably unique. Blade Warrior remains a cult favourite, an atmospheric journey through shadow and sorcery. And that brings us on to Blastar, released in 1993. This is Core Design's one of their most visually striking shooters. An ambitious multi-directional blaster mixing Bosconian, cosmic pirate and Uridium influences into a fast, chaotic sci-fi fever dream. The game begins with 360-degree free roaming stages where your ship remains fixed at the centre while the world scrolls around you. These early levels can feel frantic and a little claustrophobic, with large sprites and erratic enemy patterns giving you precious little warning before the danger arrives. But push past those levels and the game opens up beautifully. Spectacular horizontal and vertical scrollers dripping with HR Giga-like alien art, pulsating organic textures and brooding techno ambience. It's a technical showpiece, overscan graphics, rich colour gradients and a thumping soundtrack that delivers either full music or full SFX, though never both simultaneously, which was so common sadly on the Amiga. But the inertia-based movement demands patience. But once mastered, the game reveals a surprising amount of variety, style and fun. It's flawed, fierce and visually dazzling. Blastar, divisive but unforgettable late-era Amiga shooter. And that takes us to Blasteroids, the Atari update sequel to Asteroids. And this home port takes the classic Asteroids formula of the arcade original and runs with it. Strapping a jet engine to it, it throws you into a series of enclosed arenas where everything around you wants you dead. The Amiga version keeps the arcade structure intact, 3 ship forms, power-ups that actually matter, and a steady climb through the tougher sectors until you face the smug, taunting Mukor. The controls are responsive, the rotation feels right, and the shooting has enough bite to keep the screen busy. The visuals are clean, but not spectacular, and the sound effects, whilst they do the job, they don't leave much of an impression. What carries the game, though, is its pace. The quick rounds, constant threats, and a loop that encourages you to dive straight back in. It's not a technical showcase, but neither was the arcade original. But it is a tight, confident update of the Golden Age Atari classic. A solid arcade blast that still holds up today. Okay, then we get Blazing Thunder, released in 1991 by High-Tech Software. This is a gloriously over-the-top budget blaster, a vertical run-and-gun that mixes Ikari Warrior mayhem with tongue-in-cheek 80s action movie bravado. You play a Rambo-esque commando, walking tank Flintstone style across enemy terrain. An absurd visual that somehow works beautifully. The action is immediate and relentless. Waves of bazooka troopers erupt from bunkers, jeeps tear across the screen, aircraft dive bomb your position, and the landscape itself needs blasting apart to clear a route forward. The sprites are colourful and has wonderful explosions and surprisingly slick scrolling, giving the game has far more polish than many of its full-price contemporaries. Each level ends with a boss encounter, beginning with an enormous multi-turret super tank whose gun must be disabled one by one. Each set piece sets the tone for the game's old school challenge. Despite the chaos, the controls remain sharp, and the cracking title theme music and great sound effects really help sell the arcade energy. Overall, it's fast, silly, surprisingly satisfying budget title. Blazing Thunder stands as one of High-Tech's most enjoyable Amiga games. And that brings us on to Blinky's Scary School, released in 1990. This is a charmingly odd budget platformer that sits somewhere between Dizzy-style object puzzling and Jet Set Willy flick screen exploration. You play Blinky, a wide-eyed little ghost tasked with clearing hazards from a haunted school by fetching the correct items, brewing spells, and avoiding a menagerie of pests, spiders, mice, bouncing frogs, and the occasional overeager Ghost Buster. The movement is stiff and the jumping is a little imprecise, but the game has genuine character, bright cartoon rooms, cute animations, and that familiar sense of just one more screen, just one more item that keeps you exploring. There's a surprising amount of backtracking as you hunt ingredients for the cauldron, but fans of multi-screen collect and use platformers will find the rhythm cozy and nostalgic. It's simple, cheerful, and very much of the budget game era. Blinky's Scary School remains a likeable little supernatural wanderer. Then we get Blitz Bombers, released in 1993, a lively Bomberman-style multiplayer game. Blitz Bombers succeeds brilliantly as a party title for up to 4 players navigating destructible mazes, planting bombs to trap opponents while grabbing power-ups that increase blast range, speed, and special ability. The game captures the chaotic energy of Hudson's classic with crisp sprite work, a colourful, easy-to-read arenas, controls are responsive, and ensures competitive play remains fair but frantic. While the single-player modes are modest, the game truly shines in multiplayer, where mind games, last-second escapes, and explosive chain reactions create constant excitement. The Amiga PD roots don't hinder its quality. Blitz Bombers feels polished, energetic, and endlessly replayable. It remains one of the best multiplayer experiences on the Amiga, full stop, regardless of being the public domain scene. And that brings us on to Blob, released in 1993 by Core Design. This is one of their more unusual creations, a 3D platformer hybrid where you bounce a blue creature across floating tiles suspended in space. It's a game built entirely around momentum. You hop, ricochet, climb, slide, and occasionally plummet, or very often plummet in my case, while trying to compete and complete objectives that range from colouring tiles to rescuing tiny blobettes. The overhead isometric perspective gives the world a distinctive depth, and the animation brings Blob to life with quirky charm that keeps the action playful even when there's great difficulty spikes. It's clever, original, and mechanically rich, but also notoriously difficult and tricky. Falling from too great a height cracks tiles, slippery ice blocks send you sliding to your despairing dark blue doom, and hidden platforms flip in and out as alien hazards appear just when you think you've mastered a level. The soundtrack, meanwhile, is a highlight with upbeat, varied, and surprisingly polished for a single disc released. Overall, it's inventive, frustrating, and full of personality. Blob stands as one of the Amiga's more distinctive early 90s oddities, equal parts of brilliance and bounce-induced rage. That brings us on to Blockhead, released in 1988. This is one of those quirky late 80s Amiga oddities that feels like a cross between a platformer, a puzzle game, and a mild exercise in frustration management. Developed by Apord and published by Digital Magic, it places you in control of a robot-like character navigating trap rooms filled with sliding blocks, moving hazards and tight timing challenges. Visually, it's unmistakably 88. It's got bright colours but very basic, simple sprites and a minimalist animation. But the charm is undoubtedly there. Each screen presents itself as a self-contained puzzle, pushing you to think ahead while reacting quickly to the moving obstacles. Controls are again a little stiff, but once you adapt, the game reveals an addictive, fun game with plenty of just one more go appeal. And that brings us on to Blockhead 2, released in 1989. This builds on Apord's quirky original, delivering another batch of clever single-screen puzzles, where precision, timing and smart block shoving are keys to survival. The premise is simple, being still to guide your odd little hero across increasingly devious rooms filled with sliding walls, crushers, conveyor belts, teleport pads and enemies that turn each puzzle into a tight, twitchy challenge. Visually, it is a clear step up from the first game. Sprites are sharper this time, animation is better, and the backgrounds are more varied, and it gives the game therefore a stronger identity. The faster pacing is also immediately noticeable. Levels are tighter and trickier, demanding quick reactions rather than leisurely planning. Fortunately though, the controls here are more responsive this time, making the constant retries feel fair rather than frustrating. And that brings us on to Blockout, released in 1989 by Imageworks. If Tetris twisted your brain in 2 dimensions, Blockout arrives on the Amiga to finish the job in 3. This clever 3D puzzle game drops you into a deep rectangular well and challenges you to rotate falling polycubes along every axis, forward, back, left, right, counterwise and counterclockwise. It's simple in principle, brutal in practice and utterly addictive once spatial logic clicks. The Amiga version is clean and slick with crisp vector-style block rendering and smooth animation that makes the game surprisingly readable. Colour coding helps immensely as the game gets frantic and your brain starts screaming for mercy. Controls are responsive, thankfully, though mastering the full sets of rotations does take practice, particularly as it gets faster. It's a perfect example of minimalist design doing exactly what it needs to do. And that brings us on to Blood Money, a visually stunning shooter from DMA Design. Blood Money showcases early Psygnosis production values, detailed sprites, rich colour palettes, and a moody atmospheric soundtrack. Players choose between 4 themed worlds: jungle, water, ice and fire, each presenting unique enemy behaviours, hazards and branching level paths. The game's difficulty is famously punishing, demanding pixel-perfect manoeuvring and rapid reflexes. However, the challenge is part of its appeal. Mastering the enemy patterns and learning safe routes through the dense bullet streams offers deep satisfaction. The dynamic score system, where players purchase upgrades using collected cash, adds a strategy layer to the proceedings and is a great addition. The Amiga version is fluid, scrolling, and a strong sound design create a memorable audio-visual experience. Blood Money may be tough, but it remains one of the most iconic early shooters of the platform, and an essential chapter in DMA's pre-Lemmings history. And I do urge anyone to listen to that fantastic intro music that mixes in Harry Enfield and a whole host of great clips. Bloodfest 1989 is the kind of public domain oddity every Amiga owner stumbled across at some point. A scruffy dungeon crawler built with enthusiasm rather than expertise. The moment you step into its endless grey corridors, you'll know what you're in for. Repetitive mazes, crude wall textures, level layouts that feel randomly sketched rather than designed. Movement is twitchy, collision is unreliable, and enemies often score cheap hits. Yeah, I wanted to mention it because this game does have impressive assets of the monster sprites. They're big, imaginative, grotesque, and full of more polish than anything else in the package. Every new creature is a small reward, a flash of creativity in an otherwise bare-bone experience. Yes, there's no music, there's little atmosphere, but for a quick go, Bloodfest has that unmistakable public domain charm. It's rough, messy, but strangely compelling for a quick blast, even if it collapses under longer play. Then we get BloodNet, released in 1993. This is a cyberpunk RPG unlike anything else on the Amiga. BloodNet plunges players into a gritty, near-future New York where vampires, hackers, and mega corporations collide. You play Ransom Stark, infected by a vampire and racing against time to retain your humanity while uncovering a sinister conspiracy. The game blends point-and-click exploration, turn-based combat, and open-ended character customization, allowing players to recruit allies, enhance cybernetic abilities, and navigate a sprawling web of storylines. The gritty pixel art and atmospheric music create a moody, oppressive world. Dialogue is rich and branching, giving meaningful weight to your choices. Some mechanics do feel cumbersome, but the ambition and depth of the game overshadow its rough edges. For players seeking a dark, narrative-driven RPG steeped in cyberpunk style and vampire lore, BloodNet is one of the Amiga's most compelling experiences. And that brings me on to Blood Witch. This is a distinctive and influential dungeon crawl notable for its two-player simultaneous co-op, a rarity for the genre in 1989. Players choose from multiple classes across 4 mystical towers, each filled with monsters, traps, and puzzles. The split-screen views allow 2 players to explore independently or cooperate, adding enormous depth and replayability. The game features real-time combat, colourful spell effects, and surprisingly deep dialogue system, allowing negotiation with NPCs. Its art style is bright and imaginative, contrasting with the usually darker tones of dungeon crawlers. While the interface shows its age, the freedom, charm, and cooperative experience keep Blood Witch beloved among fans. A rich, pioneering title that paved the way for later team-based RPGs on home computers. Okay, this is a good one. It's Blues Brothers. This is one of the Titus's most likeable efforts. A bright, fun platformer that captures the spirit of Jake and Elwood far better than anyone expected. You guide the brothers through 6 sprawling levels, from warehouses to department stores to backstage corridors, hunting down stolen musical equipment while dodging security guards, dogs, and assorted slapstick hazards. Movement is fast and smooth, with enormous leaps, springy physics, and the satisfying thud of lobbing crates at enemies. What really sells the game is its personality. The cartoon animation is crisp, colourful, expressive, and really captures the Blues Brother characters. And the soundtrack channels the film's energy with upbeat renditions of all the classic blues themes. 2-player co-op is the standout feature, with chaotic, funny, and surprisingly well implemented, allowing 2-play on-screen action. Even if the shared screen, though, can turn things a little bit frantic. Overall, though, it's lively, charming, and sharply presented. Blues Brothers stands out as one of the Amiga's most best beloved movie-inspired platformers. And that brings us on to BMX Simulator, released in 1988 by Codemasters and done by the Oliver twins, who of course created Dizzy. BMX Simulator brings Codemasters' classic budget racer to the Amiga, with all the frantic top-down track skidding chaos that made the original an 8-bit favourite. The premise is simple: pedal like mad around a series of obstacle-packed courses, hit the jumps, cleanly avoid the hay bales, and try not to embarrass yourself in front of the crowd or in front of your mate if you're playing 2-player. The Amiga version keeps the clean, colourful presentation with oversized riders and bright cartoon-style tracks. While the visuals are sharper than the 8-bit original, action remains cheerfully loose and slippery. The handling takes a few laps to get used to, but every corner, once you master it, feels like a wrestling match between momentum and panic in a good way. But once you crack it, the game becomes fast, competitive, competitive and surprisingly addictive. Sound is basic, but for a budget game, this is iconic Codemasters, and it retains all the energy of those 8-bit classics, being a simple, scrappy piece of fun. Textbook budget brilliance from the 80s. Okay, then we get Bob's Bad Day, released in 1993 by Psygnosis. This is a wonderful oddball puzzle action hybrid in which you guide Bob, and there's very much a sort of like a love letter to the Taito classic Camel Tree. But here in this game, Bob has been unfortunately transformed into a spinning ball. So you must go through rotating mazes filled with hazards, switches, and tight time limits. The game flips the traditional perspective, so instead of moving Bob directly, you rotate the entire maze around him, creating a unique balance of physics and spatial awareness. Levels become increasingly devious, incorporating moving platforms, teleporters, and precise drop zones. The presentation is classic early 90s. Psygnosis is colourful, quirky, and packed with personality, and the soundtrack keeps the tempo high, driving you through each time challenge. While the difficulty curve is steep in this game, especially in the later stages where it demands perfect rotations, the result is a remarkably satisfying brain teaser. Bob's Bad Day stands out as one of the Amiga's most unusual yet compelling puzzle games, blending action and logic with a memorable visual style and addictive retry one more go gameplay. Okay, then we get Stir Crazy featuring Bobo, or Bobo Stir Crazy. Infogram's clown mascot may have not set the world on fire, but Stir Crazy featuring Bobo remains one of the more unusual oddities in the Amiga cartoon game library. Rather than a single adventure, Stir Crazy is a collection of short comic-style action sequences stitched together with Bobo's rubber-limbed slapstick and bright circus-inspired presentation. Each stage plays like a mini arcade challenge, outrunning guards, dodging hazards, performing stunts, or causing as much mischief as possible. Controls are simple but intentionally chaotic, matching Bobo's personality, half skill, half anarchy. This works better in some events than others, but when it clicks, the game is infectious with its silly energy. The Amiga version shines with colourful visuals, bold sprites, and smooth cartoon animations. Sound effects are suitably goofy, and the gameplay's music keeps things lively. It's a lightweight and undeniably whimsical, but Stir Crazy featuring Bobo has a quirky charm that makes it hard to forget. A true 80s Infogrames curio. Then we get Body Blows, released by Team 17. This is a confident entry into the one-on-one fighting genre, a direct response to the poor Street Fighter II port that arrived on the Amiga, and Team 17 showing that a much better version could have been done. The game features a roster of colourful fighters, each with their own unique moves and special attacks, set across bold, vividly drawn arenas. The controls are simplified compared to the arcade fighters. Of course, you only have the single button, removing complex diagonal inputs and instead utilising straightforward combinations suited to a one-button Amiga joystick. The design choice makes it highly accessible while retaining the strategic depth through timing and spacing. The animation is smooth, the characters are expressive and imaginative, and the soundtrack is awesome throughout. Although seasoned fighting games may sniff at their limited mechanics, Body Blow succeeds on the Amiga as a fast, responsive and visually polished fighter tailor-made for the Amiga hardware. It laid the groundwork for Team 17's later refinements, including Body Blows Galactic and Ultimate Body Blows, and remains the cornerstone of Amiga fighting history. And that brings us on to the sequel, Body Blows Galactic, released in 1993. This is a significantly expanded follow-up to Body Blows. Body Blows Galactic takes the fighting action to interplanetary stage, introducing a much larger roster, more elaborate special moves, and a broader range of themed arenas. Characters now hail from exotic alien worlds, resulting in a fun mix of visual creativity and variety. The game improves on the original in nearly every way, with smooth animation, tighter controls, smarter AI, better balancing between the fighters. The combat has more nuance, with characters boasting quicker attacks, dash movements, and more 4 distinct playstyles. Backgrounds are rich and imaginative, ranging from icy caverns to deep space vistas, while still simpler than, of course, arcade fighters being stuck on the single button fire button. Body Blows Galactic, nevertheless, is arguably Team 70's best entry in the series. Polished, ambitious, and bursting with personality. For Amiga fans seeking the accessible yet satisfying fighter, this installment remains a top recommendation. And then we get Bograts, the puzzling misadventure, released in 1994. This is one of the Amiga's more unusual 90s puzzle platformers. Part Lemmings, part Lost the Plot cartoon, and entirely its own strange little thing. You guide a pack of goggle-eyed Bograts that look like those rubber boggle toys used to get in the 80s, through a series of sprawling, hazard-laden levels by manipulating the environment, sliding platforms, triggering switches, opening doors, and generally outwitting whatever bizarre contraption that's been cooked up. The visuals are colourful and full of personality, with nicely animated sprites and detailed backgrounds, giving each location a quirky fantasy flavour. The humour is very mid-90s, mildly anarchic and occasionally surreal, and frequently charming. Then we get Bomb Jack, released in 1988 on the Amiga and published by Elite. This faithfully recreates the addictive arcade original classic, in which players leap, glide and spring across platforms, collecting bombs while avoiding a cast of colourful enemies. The simple but precise mechanics allow Jack to control his descent, enabling skilled players to weave through the danger with acrobatic flair. Each level offers strategic bonuses for collecting bombs in the correct sequence, adding a layer of risk and reward tension. The Amiga version captures all this of the arcade's wonderful visuals with crisp controls as well, and maintains smooth movement and responsive jumping, while the sound effects are more subdued compared to the arcade original. The core gameplay remains intact, fast, challenging and incredibly Moorish. Bomb Jack is quintessential pick-up and play experience that embodies classic arcade fun on the Amiga, and it remains one of the stronger straight conversions of the late 80s. But it'd be remiss of me not to mention the 2018 fan-made version of Bomb Jack called Bomb Jack Beer Edition. This gives a fast, bright and buzzing with let's remake an arcade classic in our bedroom charm. It sticks to the Bomb Jack formula we all know, swooping across the screen, chain bombs in order and weave through enemies that don't so much patrol as hurtle at you. Compared to the 1984 arcade original, Beer Edition is tight and precise and built around clean movement arcs. Still fun, still energetic, but a little bit unpredictable around the edges. The 2018 remake shows what a modernised Bomb Jack can be, with sharper controls, smoother jumps, smarter enemy patterns, and visuals that echo the arcade's crisp colour without losing its charm. Fizzy little tribute that plays like Bomb Jack with a grin and a wobble. Then we get Bomboozle, released in 1988 by Imageworks and of course developed by Tony Crowther. This is a clever blend of puzzle solving and precision movement. Bomboozle challenges players to detonate every bomb on the grid-based level without blowing themselves up in the process. On the stairs, by the way, it was called Kablooey in America. Each puzzle demands careful planning. Detonating one bomb can trigger chain reactions that after and alter the environment, blocking you in. While certain squares collapse or explode depending on their type, the game alternates between overhead and isometric perspectives, with you choosing which is best to use, adding an interesting way of tackling these puzzles. The game's character and charm comes from its deceptively simple rules that quickly evolve into brain-stretching logic scenarios. The Amiga version features bright graphics, cheerful sound effects, and responsive controls that allow for tight timing needed in certain levels. While difficulty ramps up quickly, the sense of accomplishment when cracking a tough puzzle remains high. Bomboozle offers a timeless puzzle design wrapped in Amiga presentation, cementing it as a genre favourite. And of course, famously, this was on issue 1 of Amiga Power and was the full game giveaway, which meant a lot of people experienced this game. Okay, let's go on to another one, and it's Bonanza Bros, released released in 1992 on the Amiga, published by US Gold and developed by Tech London. Of course, this is based on the Sega arcade classic and delivers a playful, stealth-tinged arcade experience starring the brothers Robo and Mobo as they attempt to steal valuables from the heavily guarded buildings. The Amiga version retains the game's distinctive cartoon aesthetics, smooth animations and comedic charm. Gameplay blends platforming, sneaking, dodging and occasional firefights as players search room to room while avoiding patrols, traps and cameras. Controls are responsive and the physics, especially sliding behind furniture or stunning guards, fit the slapstick tone. Two-player co-op is of course the highlight, like the arcade original, turning missions into chaotic, laughter-filled heists. While some compromises have been made compared to the arcade original, particularly the sound, the core experience remains intact, and Bonanza Bros is a polished and joyful Amiga title that rewards both stealthy play and brazen improvisation. Okay, then we have Das Boot, and the reason it's under the letter B is because Das means the. This brings the U-boat warfare to the Amiga with a blend of simulation and action sequences that aims to capture the desperate claustrophobic of life beneath the Atlantic. Rather than a pure study sim, it offers multiple viewpoints and mini scenarios where you manage torpedo attacks, evade destroyers, perform deck gun duels and survive depth charge hunts, pulled straight from the film's iconic mood. The visuals are clean but functional. Lots of dials, steel grey compartments and map screens. Whilst it's not the flashiest naval system on the Amiga, it nails the atmosphere. Sonar pings, distant explosions and ominous rumble of approaching destroyers keep nerves tight. The action segments from gunnery to evasive manoeuvres keep the game apace, and a variety not found in stricter sims. It's tough, tense, and a little clunky in places, but Das Boot captures the spirit of submarine survival well. A solid, atmospheric wartime sim for patient commanders. Then we got Boppin, released in 1992 on the Amiga, and this is a unique and highly creative puzzle game in which players hurl tiles across the screen to match icons and clear levels. Part arcade action, part logic puzzler, it strikes a quirky balance that sets it apart from its contemporaries. Each stage challenges players to angle throws, bounce tiles off walls and plan sequences to reach awkwardly positioned targets. The Amiga version features crisp, colourful graphics, a wonderfully offbeat soundtrack. Difficulty escalates quickly, introducing new mechanics, hazards and tile types that demand sharp thinking and precision. The game's darkly humorous tone, complete with surprising animations and eccentric characters, adds personality rarely seen in the puzzle genre. Boppin is clever, challenging and deeply satisfying, making it one of the Amiga's standout puzzle experiences. Okay, now we have Boston Bomb Club. This is one of the Amiga's most eccentric and inventive puzzle games. A frantic mechanical maze runner set inside a sort of steampunk 19th century gentleman's club where top-hatted scientists guide lit bombs across elaborate contraptions. Each level was a tabletop labyrinth built from rotating junctions, collapsing bridges, trampolines, fixed gates and moving barriers, all of which must be manipulated in real time to shepherd the sizzling bombs into a waiting bucket of water before it explodes. The setup feels like Pipe Mania spliced with a Victorian cartoon and full of cheeky humour, theatrical characters and unpredictable hazards that encourage both planning and panicked improvisation. Later stages become wonderfully vicious, demanding rapid gate switching and clever use of bomb parking to buy precious time. Boston Bomb Club remains a standout puzzle title, a clever clockwork conundrum wrapped in wit and style. Then we have Boulder Dash, which was released on 1987 on the Amiga, unlike the 1984 original, of course done by First Star Software. This is a timeless puzzle action classic. Boulder Dash remains as engaging on the Amiga as it was on the original 8-bit carnations. You control Rockford as he digs through subterranean caverns, collecting diamonds while avoiding deadly falling boulders and roaming enemies. The brilliance lies in its physics-driven gameplay. Each move risks altering the environment, creating chain reactions that can either save or crush you. The Amiga version enhances the experience with smoother scrolling, cleaner visuals and great sound effects. The difficulty curve is like the original, sharp but fair. The early caves teaching essential skills that later puzzles pushed to their limits. Despite its simplicity, the game rewards strategic thinking, lightning quick reactions, and careful path finding. Boulder Dash is endlessly addictive, offering a perfect blend of logic and real-time tension. And that brings me to Boulder Dash Construction Kit, released in 1989. This takes the beloved arcade puzzle formula of the original game and elevates it with a full-featured level editor, letting players create, customize, and share their own cave designs. The core gameplay remains intact, guiding Rockford through dangerous underground caverns, collecting diamonds, avoiding enemies, and manipulate the falling boulders with precision. But the Amiga version takes all of this and allows you to build your own creations, which is awesome. Build your own insanely tough challenges for other players to tackle yourself. Overall, is a robust construction kit tool, an example of player-driven creativity on home computers, offering nearly endless replayability. And that brings us on to B.A.T, released in 1991 by Imageworks. This is a sharp, mischievous, isometric puzzler that blends Lemming-style indirect control with fast-scrolling race against time. You control Nathan, the leather-jacketed brat of the title, across 12 dreamlike stages by dropping directional arrows, items, and tools on the terrain while the world scrolls relentlessly upwards. You never control him directly. He marches forward with stubborn determination, and your job is to outpace the scrolling screen while neutralizing hazards with the right instructions and objects. There's weights to crush, spring toys, blocks to span gaps, dynamite for rocks, and so on. It's stylish, bright, and surprisingly tense. The clean isometric art, crisp animation, and Bjorn Lin's upbeat score gives it a polished feel, and when everything clicks, the game becomes a frantic test of timing and planning. But it's also unforgiving. One misplaced arrow or mistimed action means you have to start the whole damn level over again, and the disc access between retries can really grate. Still, I think it's inventive, demanding, it's full of personality. B.A.T remains annoying, but a distinctive and occasionally infuriating highlight of early 90s Amiga puzzling. Okay, this is the interesting one. This is Braticus, released in 1985/1986 and was pretty much the first title by Psygnosis. Few Amiga games carry as much industry mythology as Braticus. Originally, this was conceived under Imagine Software as Bandersnatch, the fabled £1 million game that never materialised but was advertised everywhere. When it never got released, when Imagine spectacularly imploded, all on a TV show called Commercial Breaks. With the bailiffs knocking on the door, the people who worked on Bandersnatch frantically hid all the code and ran off with it. And they formed Psygnosis from the bankruptcy of Imagine. And so naturally their first game was Braticus, which was basically all the work they'd done on Bandersnatch, but converted for the Amiga and made its own game. It became a landmark, therefore, in microcomputer game development history. But the game itself, set in a grimy sci-fi underworld, you play Kine, a genetically engineered fugitive trying to clear his name on the lawless asteroid of Braticus. The game's rotoscope characters, lavish hand-drawn art, and cinematic ambitions were astonishing for the mid-80s, a glimpse of the future Psygnosis that they would later define. But ambition came at a cost. The innovative gesture-driven control system is notoriously clumsy, making movement a fight and combat unintentionally comedic. Beneath the control scheme, though, lies a fascinating world, branching objectives, and an atmosphere years ahead of its time. Flawed? Absolutely. Important? Hugely. Braticus remains a bold, messy, visionary relic. A phoenix that rose from the Bandersnatch ashes and launched Psygnosis into gaming legend. And that brings us on to Breach, released in 1987/1988. This is a tough brain-teaser squad-level strategy game that laid the groundwork for the deeper and more polished sequels that followed. Presented in a clean top-down tactical view, you command a team of Space Marines performing infiltration, rescue and sabotage missions inside alien bases. Every choice matters. Action points determine movements and firing doors can conceal ambushes, and line of sight can make the difference between a clean mission and a dead squad. Though visually sparse, the atmosphere is strong here, with tense, methodical and unforgiving gameplay. Squad members gain experience across missions, gradually improving accuracy and morale, which gives the game a subtle but rewarding sense of progression and light RPG elements. The interface is a little stiff to play today, but it is brutally hard. But once it clicks, the game becomes a compelling cycle of planning, risk-taking and close-quarter firefights that I love. Particularly if you love games like Laser Squad, you'll love this. It's tough, strategic, ahead of its time. Breach remains a fascinating early entry into the Amiga tactical lineage, raw, challenging and remarkably ambitious for 1987. And that brings us on to its sequel, Breach II, released in 1990. This is a follow-up to the squad-level tactics game that builds smartly on the foundations of the original Breach. It offers a richer, more flexible, more punishing take on sci-fi combat. Played from an angled, isometric view, every mission places you in command of a small team of Marines infiltrating enemy facilities, recovering data, rescuing prisoners, or securing strategic objectives. Action unfolds turn by turn, with each Marine governed by stamina, action points, and line-of-sight rules that reward cautious, deliberate play. The standout feature is the progression system. Surviving squad leaders evolve between missions, gaining accuracy, resilience, and morale boosts, making their genuine survival meaningful. Tools such as detectors, hacking suits, smoke grenades, and proximity charges adds variety, while the scenario editor extends replayability far beyond the built-in missions. Atmospheric, demanding, and richly tactical, Breach 2 remains one of the Amiga's most engaging squad-level experiences, a true cult favourite for the armchair commanders. Okay, then we have Breakthrough, released in 2024, which is a fan release, because we never actually saw Breakthrough being released on the Amiga back in the day. More than 30 years after the original coin-op thundered across arcade floors, Breakthrough in 2024 roars back onto the Amiga in this fan-made remake. It's an absolute love letter to the Data East frantic vehicle smashing classic as well. Rather than mimicking the arcade classic, the version embraces the Amiga strengths with colourful graphics, great explosions and far smoother scrolling than you expect from a hobby project. The gameplay remains gloriously chaotic. You blast across enemy territory in a super jeep for the military, leaping mines, dodging shells and annihilating anything that moves. The remake keeps the original's brutal pace. Visually it shines with redrawn sprites, bold backdrops and lively animations, giving it a polished, modern retro look. The soundtrack pulses with energetic chiptunes that wouldn't fill out a place in late-era commercial release. It's a superb, respectful remake/remastering and one of the standout fan productions for the modern Amiga scene. This is an interesting one. It's Breathless, released in 1995 by Field of Vision. This is one of the most impressive Doom-style shooters, delivering fast 3D action on AGA hardware with surprising smoothness and technical flair. The environments are clean and detailed, with textured corridors and atmospheric lighting and strong sci-fi aesthetics that gives the game a distinctive identity. Gameplay is tight and responsive, offering quick movements, satisfying weapons, and enemy encounters that reward accuracy and awareness. Levels are large and maze-like, filled with switches, secrets, and branching paths that encourage exploration. The soundtrack likewise is moody, and the sound effects add to every firefight as you battle your way through. Breathless doesn't just imitate Doom. It adapts the formula to the Amiga's strength, resulting in a shooter that feels fast, polished, and genuinely exciting on its own merits. It remains a landmark AGA title and a testament to what dedicated developers could achieve on the platform's final generation hardware. And that brings us on to Brian Lara's Cricket, released in 1995 by Audiogenic. Audiogenic's final evolution of their long-running cricket engine arrives on the Amiga dressed in the West Indian flair as Brian Lara's Cricket. And whilst it shares essentially the core game of Graham Gooch's world-class cricket, there are some notable tweaks that make this version feel fresher and more accessible. The presentation is a little bit cleaner with brighter colours, sharper player sprites, and an interface that feels more modern than Gooch's slightly muted palette. Play animation is a bit smoother as well, and the pacing of matches has been tightened so overflows more naturally. Batting feels more responsive too. Timing windows are a touch more forgiving and have more satisfying drives and cuts than Gooch's sometimes finicky precision. Bowling also remains deep, but spin in particular feels a lot easier to control this time compared to Gooch's trickier delivery system. Audio is still fantastic and it captures the experience of the original series. Overall, Brian Lara's Cricket is less a full rebuild, more of a tweaked, refined, friendlier sequel, a more colourful reissue of the already excellent Gooch engine. Smoother, slicker, and still a lot of fun, being one of the best cricket games that's ever been. And that brings us on to Brian the Lion, released in 1994, published by Psygnosis and developed by Reflections Interactive. Brian the Lion is one of the Amiga's most visually impressive platformers, showcasing the artistic and technical prowess of Reflections Interactive. You guide Brian across vividly animated forests, caverns, deserts, and dreamlike fantasy stages, all brought to life through fluid character animation and detailed backgrounds. The parallax scrolling does sometimes make your character feel like he's floating when he's jumping, and there's a few elements when you're falling as well that feels a bit weird, but controls are tight and versatile, with Brian able to sprint, leap, pounce and claw his way through enemies. Levels are packed with secrets, branching paths and rewarding exploration. The soundtrack is awesome as well, complementing the colourful visuals with upbeat, melodic jungle tunes. There is some difficulty spikes and balancing in the game that has problems. Enemy placements can be unforgiving, for example, but the game's polish and charm just shine through. Many platformers on the Amiga aim to rival console titles. What I love about Brian the Lion, it's one of the few that truly succeeded on its own terms. It remains a standout example of platforming genre executed on the Amiga with ambition, flair and tremendous craftsmanship. And that brings us on to Brides of Dracula, 1991 by Magic Bytes. This tries to blend platforming, light puzzle solving and hammer horror vibe, but the Amiga version never quite settles into a confident groove. You guide a vampire hunter through gloomy castles, crypts and forests, staking undead foes and collecting items needed to push deeper into each area. The concept is solid and the artwork has flashes of style, bold colours, great sprite work and some atmospheric backgrounds. Yet the game does struggle where it matters most. The controls feel a little bit clunky, jumps lack precision, and enemy patterns often rely on trial and error rather than your playing skill. Combat is functional but rarely satisfying, and the pacing drifts all over the place as you backtrack through similar looking rooms. There is something here though, there is a certain charm in the theme, and the presentation has enough personality to keep you curious. But overall it is mediocre, but I had to include it because it's a serviceable gothic romp, never comes quite alive, but it's worth the play. And that brings us on to Brutal Sports Football, released in 1993. This blends violent fantasy combat with arcade-style football. That's American football. Brutal Sports Football offers chaotic gameplay that feels like a cross between American football and medieval warfare and Blood Bowl, the Warhammer board game. Teams of armoured warriors clash on fields littered with power-ups, hazards and discarded body parts. Victory can be achieved by scoring points or simply punching and annihilating the opposing team, whichever comes first. The Amiga version delivers smooth animation, colourful sprites and fast, fun action, with responsive controls that keep matches frantic but fair. Players can kick, punch, throw weapons and unleash brutal tackles, creating unpredictable and entertaining outcomes. The tournament and league modes add longevity here, while the tongue-in-cheek presentation keeps the tone light despite the violence. Brutal sports football stands out as a unique hybrid that fully embraces its absurdity. And that brings us on to Brutal Paws of Fury, released in 1994. This is a charming anthropomorphic fighting game with Brutal Paws of Fury pits martial arts trained animals against each other in a colourful tournament decades before Kung Fu Panda. Each character, ranging from karate kangaroos to ninja cats, has unique moves and animations, giving the roster playful variety. The Amiga version features smooth animation and attractive backgrounds inspired by traditional martial arts settings. Combat leans towards accessibility than complexity, with simple input combination designed for a one-button joystick. The game introduces a progression system, which is its standout feature, in which fighters learn new moves as they advance through, and this adds like a progression-like RPG element, which is fantastic, and I wish more games encourage this in this genre. Whilst it's not as fast or as deep as arcade fighters, it excels with style, humour and charm. The soundtrack is also upbeat, memorable, and supporting the game's bright, friendly tone. Brutal Paws of Fury is an enjoyable, easy to pick up fighter that remains popular with Amiga fans who appreciate character and personality over hardcore mechanics. And that brings us on to Bubba and Sticks, released in 1994, and of course done by Core Design and Simon Phipps. Inventive and full of personality, Bubba and Sticks is a puzzle platformer starring Bubba, a good-natured buffoon, aided by his sentient wooden companion alien Sticks. The duo must navigate a series of imaginative alien environments using clever teamwork mechanics. Sticks acts as a tool, ladder, lever, grappling pole, weapon, and the game constantly introduces creative ways to use him to solve puzzles or overcome obstacles. The Amiga version features rich cartoon-style visuals, expressive animations, and a humorous tone that sets it apart from more conventional platformers. Levels prioritise lateral thinking over pure action, rewarding experimentation and observation. Controls are smooth and the pacing is relaxed, making the game approachable without sacrificing challenge. Bubba and Sticks remains a beloved entry in the Amiga library for its originality, charm, clever design, and gorgeous artwork. And I'm talking gorgeous artwork, let's go to Bubble and Squeak, released in 1994 by Audiogenic. This is a polished, wonderful platform adventure that pairs you with Squeak, an adorable alien sidekick who assists both in combat and puzzle solving. You switch between direct control of Bubble and issuing commands to Squeak, creating a cooperative gameplay with a single player. The level design blends action, exploration, and strategic companion interaction, often requiring clever coordination to open up passages or collect items. The visuals are bright and colourful with smooth scrolling, expressive character animations that rival contemporary console titles. The music is upbeat, particularly beautiful on the CD32 version, and memorable, adding to the game's friendly, fantastical game atmosphere. Bubble and Squeak strikes an excellent balance between challenge and accessibility, appealing to young players while offering depth for gameplay veterans. It remains a most charming Amiga platformer of the 90s. And that brings us on to Bubble Bubble, released on 1989 on the Amiga and published by Firebird and developed by Software Creations. This faithfully captures the joyous arcade gameplay that made the Taito original such a classic. You control Bub and Bob as they trap enemies in bubbles, burst them and collect fruit and bonuses across 100 single-screen stages. The controls are tight and responsive, preserving the game's satisfying rhythm and movement, bubble timing and chain popping for score maximisation. While the Amiga port slightly tones down some of the arcade's colour and sound, it retains the most important elements. It has the core addictive co-op gameplay, the cheerful music, the endlessly replayable stage design, and honed to perfection gameplay. The charm of the game comes not just from the mechanics, but the warm, inviting atmosphere and the clever enemy behaviour that keeps each level a self-contained puzzle and interesting. Bubble Bubble remains one of the greatest arcade conversions on the Amiga and a staple for multiplayer fun. But I'd be remiss not to mention Tiny Bubble, which was a freeware fan remake that was done in 2020. If ever you wished to see what the Amiga could have done if it had done a proper arcade faithful version of Bubble Bubble, Tiny Bubble shows you it's possible, and the dream has come true. And then some. Built specifically for AGA machines, this fan-made marvel rewrites the Amiga books with a conversion so slick, so colourful, so faithful that it genuinely feels like a lost commercial release from an alternate timeline. Everything is here. 50 frames per second gameplay, stunning AGA enhanced visuals, backgrounds, pixel perfect enemy movements, and buttery smooth animations that blows every earlier port out of the water. The developers even recreated the original arcade timings, AI patterns, and bubble physics, making this the closest you'll ever get to the Tato cabinet without standing in front of one. The sound is also spot on, with arcade accurate music, crisp effects, and that instantly recognisable pop every Amiga kid wished that he had in the 80s. Simply put, Tiny Bubble is a masterclass in modern Amiga coding, a joyous, polished arcade perfect tribute that finally gives the machine the bubble it always deserved. And then we go to Bubble Dizzy, released in 1991 by Codemasters. This charming spin-off of the Dizzy franchise, Bubble Dizzy places the iconic egg hero underwater, where he must float to the surface using air bubbles while avoiding hazards. The game combines reflex-based action with light puzzle elements as players hop between the bubbles, time their ascents, and dodge the sea creatures. The Amiga version delivers a crisp, colourful graphic and smooth animated version of the game, creating an inviting underwater aesthetic. The ascending bubble mechanic provides fresh but frustrating gameplay compared to all the traditional Dizzy adventures, and the level designs cleverly incorporate platforms, currents, and obstacles that make each ascent unique and a challenge in itself. Of course, although shorter than a fully fledged Dizzy title, Bubble Dizzy remains enjoyable thanks to its accessibility, charm, mechanical uniqueness, and it's a delightful bite-sized Amiga experience perfect for fans of the Dizzy character. Then I've gone for Bubble Plus. This is of course the remaster version of Bubble Ghost, so I've decided just to concentrate on Bubble Plus. This came out in 1990. Bubble Plus takes the haunting charm of the 1987 game Bubble Ghost, but gives it a nice makeover. You can still guide your delicate bubble through spooky chambers, puffing gentle gusts to dodge candles, traps, and mischievous hazards. But this tweaked version tightens the controls and sharpens the pace. The bubble glides with a far more precision than in the original, allowing for braver manoeuvres and narrower escapes, feeling wonderfully rewarding. The classic corridor puzzle structure remains intact, but Bubble Plus introduces new layouts and refinements that make each room feel more dynamic, less stiff, and closer to what veteran Amiga tinkerers always wished the original had been. Visuals stay faithful to the monochrome on moody look, while the small enhancements give it an unmistakable demo scene polish. Bubble Plus isn't a sequel, but it is the version that many fans secretly played instead, being faster, smoother, and subtly superior take on the brilliant oddball concept. And then we get Buck Rogers' Countdown to Doomsday 1991 by SSI, a superb sci-fi RPG built on SSI's famed gold box engine. Buck Rogers' Countdown to Doomsday blends tactical turn-based combat with rich space opera storytelling. Players assemble a team of freedom fighters battling against the sinister Ram forces across the planets, orbital stations, and desert wastelands. The American version features clean, colourful visuals and the iconic gold box combat grid, offering deep strategic battles filled with grenades, energy weapons, and specialist skills. The narrative is engaging with strong characters, moral choices, and lore drawn from the Buck Rogers 25th century universe. Exploration spans star maps, planetary settlements, and hostile environments, each with unique encounters and puzzles. The combination of classic D&D style mechanics and sci-fi world building makes this one of the most distinctive RPGs on the Amiga, and I love it. Then we get Budokan, the martial spirit, released in 1990 by Electronic Arts. At a time when most martial arts games were obsessed with fireballs, flying spin kicks, Budokan arrived on the Amiga with something far more unusual: discipline, precision, and authenticity. This isn't a button-mashing brawler, but a measured, more meditative fighting experience where timing, stance, and technique is far more than the frantic joystick gymnasts of other fighters. You train across 4 disciplines: karate, kendo, nunchaku, and bo, before entering the prestigious Budokan tournament. Each weapon feels distinct, with carefully animated movements and beautifully drawn stances. The Amiga version shines with crisp, detailed backgrounds and fluid character animation, underscored by moody, atmospheric music that perfectly sets the gameplay. Combat is slow by design, so not for everybody, but it's deeply satisfying once you understand the slowness, spacing, and stamina. Each hit feels earned. Every mistake is punished. This was never meant to be a Street Fighter. This is instead a thoughtful martial arts simulation wrapped in gorgeous presentation. Budokan stands as one of EA's most elegant early Amiga titles. Unique, stylish, and quietly brilliant. And that brings us on to Buffalo Bill's Wild West Show, released in 1989 by Tynesoft. This is a slice of circus cowboy bombast to the Amiga, with a collection of stunt-themed mini-events that range from entertaining to outright maddening. Rather than a straight western, this one recreates the Wild West showmanship: bronco-busting, calf-roping, sharp-shooting, knife-throwing, and even a frantic stagecoach rescue. Presentation is vibrant, colourful, and unmistakably late 80s. It's got great artwork and animation, with plenty of character coming from every pixel. It doesn't reach the slickness of the eras of Amiga games back in the day, but nevertheless each event controls differently, meaning you spend far more time mastering inputs as you do performing tricks. Some, like the shooting gallery, are fun and satisfying and snappy, while others feel fiddly enough to send you stomping your cowboy boots home. The music is jaunty and suitable for the Wild West, and the sound effects add a dusty charm. The overall package is unmistakably a classic computer multi-eventer. It is uneven, occasionally, honestly quite a bit frustrating, but it's bursting with nostalgia and fun. It's not a bullseye, but a lively slice of Amiga showground fun. And that brings me to Bug Bash, which is the original game to Doodlebug, which will cover into the letter D. This is a simple, colourful, cheerful, chaotic, critter-splatting romp that feels like it escaped from a Saturday morning cartoon. Each screen stage drops you into a bright, hand-drawn world where the goal is wonderfully straightforward: shoot the bugs, pick up rubbish, and dump the trash in the bin before the timer or the pests get you. The visuals are pure charm, big goofy characters, bold colours and backgrounds that look like they were doodled with enthusiasm rather than caution. The bugs scuttle in from all directions, turning levels into frantic little playgrounds of dodging, shooting and scrambling to grab litter before it piles up. The controls are simple and snappy, and the whole experience is carried with its cute, bouncy music, which gives the game the same upbeat, almost toy box feel. It's not deep, it's not polished, but it is fun, a bright, breezy slice of Amiga eccentricity. Bug Bash is exactly what it looks like: messy, silly, basic, but lively and strangely addictive. Oh, then we come to a real classic. It is a Buggy Boy, released on the Amiga of 1988 and of course based on the arcade classic. This is a bright, fast and wonderfully smooth arcade racer that translates beautifully to the Amiga. You control an off-road buggy racing through a colourful obstacle courses filled with flags, ramps, logs, fences and hazards. The Amiga conversion preserves the arcade's crisp visuals and fluid sense of speed, offering delightful pick-up and play experience, but thankfully it actually removes the other cars of the arcade, which were more frustrating than fun, giving that random element of ending a run. Courses here vary between long roads and short time circuits, and each packed with scoring opportunities that reward skillful driving. The controls are responsive, making weaving through obstacles and hitting ramps intuitive and satisfying, while simple compared to later racers. Buggy Boy, or or Speed Buggy as it's known in the US, excels in pure fun and replayability. Its cheerful visuals and tight gameplay make it one of the Amiga's best arcade driving titles. And then we get Builderland, the story of Melba. This is one of the Amiga's more unusual 90s puzzlers, a blend of platforming, planning, and slapstick problem solving that feels lemmings collided with a construction toy set. You guide Melba across each scrolling level, but you don't control her directly. Instead, you place rotating building items, planks, springs, conveyor belts, trampolines, even explosive blocks to steer her past safely all the hazards. Visually, it's bright and endearing, full of cute animations and nice little touches. The colourful tiles make the world feel like a cheery Saturday morning cartoon, and Melba herself is wonderfully expressive, whether happily trotting through or panicking as a trap goes wrong. The music is upbeat and playful, perfectly fitting the game's light-hearted personality. Don't be fooled by the kid-like charm. Levels grow quickly demanding, requiring careful timing and well-placed gadgets to get Melba through unscathed. Some puzzles border on fiendish, but solving them feels incredibly satisfying, and it is always doable. It never feels cheap. Inventive, adorable, and deceptively challenging, Builderland is a forgotten gem. That brings us on to Bumpy's Arcade Fantasy, which is done by Linnell. This is one of those cheerful, hyper, colourful puzzle platformers that only the early 90s Amiga scene could produce. A reimagining of Lauricell's Bumpy pop-up concept, this version expands the formula into a full-blown arcade adventure packed with bounce pads, hazard, switches, enemies, and all sorts of clever stage gimmicks. You guide your little bouncing ball character through dozens of single-screen challenges, collecting items and navigating platforms while avoiding spikes, traps, and mischievous creatures. The physics-based movement, equal parts floaty and precise, gives the game a lovely rhythmic feel once you get the bounce timing down. Visuals are nice, and the Amiga-friendly cartoon tiles, colourful backdrops, and expressive little enemies everywhere really engage you in the game. The music's upbeat and chirpy and what you would expect, matching the game's arcade toy box energy perfectly. Difficulty ramps up sharply in this game, but it never is unfair. It's the kind of game where every failure feels like you almost had it, and it was down to you that you failed. It's charming, clever, and polished. Bumpy's Arcade Fantasy is one of likeable releases, and I think a hidden gem for puzzle action fans. And that brings me on to Bump and Burn, released in 1994 by Grand Slam. This is Amiga's wildest attempt at a kart racer. A riot of cartoon characters and colours, madcap competitors, and outrageous weapons stitched together in 14 race tournament across bizarre worlds of Tunia is essentially wacky races for the Amiga or Mario Kart, and it has Loretta Lamore, Mr. Fabulous, the Bucktooth Beavers, Colonel Carnage, all jostling for position in the game, dropping oil slicks, firing bombs, and unleashing homing rockets while you try to take and stay alive long enough to hit the finish line. The handling is light, nimble, and instantly accessible, with joystick support that feels cleaner than many Amiga races. Tracks undulate beautifully. The scrolling is fast, the parts shot between races adds a welcome touch of progression. Two-player split screen is the star attraction, with smooth, competitive, and chaotic in the best way. Though single-player sometimes leaves you racing long stretches without an opponent in sight due to sometimes easy AI. Also, disc swapping on the A500 can be painful, but the spectacle more than makes up for it, and these days, you've got WHD load to enjoy these games without all the disc swaps. Overall, it's energetic, colourful, and packed with personality. Bump and Burn stands as one of the Amiga's most exuberant and entertaining party racers. Okay, then we have Bureaucracy, released on 1987 by Infocom. Bureaucracy is Douglas Adams at his most wickedly spiteful. Of course, Douglas Adams wrote the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy books, etc. And the Amiga version delivers every ounce of the author's delicious cruelty. This isn't just a text adventure. It's a simulation of being trapped inside inside an administrative black hole, where every form comes in triplicate and every attempt to fix a problem generates 2 new ones. You start innocently enough. You've moved house, your bank doesn't believe you exist anymore, and your blood pressure is now an in-game statistic that rises every time life kicks you, which is constantly, just like in real life. It's dry, biting, brilliantly British humour, executed in pure Infocom style, with some of the sharpest prose they've ever shipped. The Amiga clean interface and crisp text rendering makes the absurdity even easier to follow, even as the puzzles become increasingly devious. Expect to negotiate with airline clerks, malfunctioning computers, and your own rising stress levels. It's infuriating, ingenious, and utterly unique. A comedy text adventure that turns everyday life into a perfectly crafted nightmare. And then we get Burning Rubber, released in 1993. This opens with a stylish dance demo intro that looks fantastic and absolutely screams this game is going to be something special. Unfortunately, when the racing actually starts, that promise evaporates somewhat. The handling is twitchy, the AI cars feel glued to invisible rails, and the track, while colourful, lack personality. There's also no in-game music, so the game feels strangely empty, relying solely on the basic engine noises and thuds. The enhanced 2MB version does improve the visuals a bit, cleaner sprites, smoother scrolling, but it can't fix the core problem of the racing. It just never feels that satisfying. Still, I do enjoy it. It is an Amiga racer, so I have to include it here. I mean, overall, corners come too fast though, collisions feel random, and the whole thing has that budget Lotus knockoff vibe that you can't quite shake. It looks the part in screenshots, but it plays something rushed to capitalise on the from the behind racing trend. There is, though, fun buried here if you persevere, but overall, Burning Rubber is a stylish intro wrapped around a very average racer. And that brings us on to Burn Time, released in 1993 by Max Design. Long before survival games became the genre of their own, Burn Time delivered one of the Amiga's most atmospheric takes on the end of the world. Set in a scorched wasteland where food, water, tools and allies are the only real currency, this strategy RPG hybrid rewards slow thinking, careful planning, and eye for territory control. You start with nothing but desperation, but must carve out a living one ruined settlement at a time. Every town you claim needs workers, hunters, guards, scavengers to keep it viable. Resources rot, weapons break, mercenaries betray you. Survival was a constant juggling act. It's harsh but wonderfully compelling. The visuals are grim but detailed, dusty ruins, parched landscapes, and expressive character portraits that make the world feel alive, or at least dying slowly. Burn Time isn't fast, flashy or friendly, but for players who love deep strategy wrapped in oppressive atmosphere, it is one of the Amiga's most unique and unforgettable experiences. So there you go. That's all the games that I think are worth playing in B. But, please like, subscribe and comment if there's any games you think I should have also included with the letter B. Or your memories of either playing these games back in the day, or even if you've played them because they were new to you or gone back to them because of the video. I'd love to hear what your opinions are. So as I say, please consider liking, commenting, subscribing. It's so difficult to get noticed on the YouTube airwaves. So any engagement or confirmation that people are enjoying the videos is all I really want. It makes it worthwhile. So thanks for watching RGDS, Games Worth Playing, Amiga, letter B, and I'll see you on the next episode for C, where we got some real classics there, as we continue our alphabetical journey through one of gaming's most iconic platform systems. So until next time, keep it retro.